Okay, that should now be live.
Thank you very much. I'll formally open the meeting. My name is Tim Bick. I'm the chair of the meeting. I'd like to begin by welcoming those members of the public and press who are watching the live stream of the meeting, and to address the members of the Assembly. I think you're all now aware of the need to keep your video camera switched on for the duration of the meeting if you can, and to keep your microphone muted except when I ask you to speak. Please click the raised hand button if you wish to ask a question or comment, and we will look out for you doing that. There is always a risk we may run into technical problems, and I would ask for your patience if we do. If that occurs, I will declare an adjournment while the fault is addressed, and the public broadcast will be paused. If it's not possible to address the fault, the meeting may be abandoned until such time as it can be reconvened, and let's hope that doesn't happen. Can I remind members and officers and public speakers that all virtual meetings like this will be recorded, and that these recordings will be published on the GCP YouTube channel. And I would just add a reminder that as well as putting your electronic hand up when you wish to speak, after you have spoken, please remember to put it down again, because it makes it much more efficient to know who we're calling as a fresh speaker, and try and plan to go off mute in good time to speak, because we've had enough of these meetings to know that a lot of time can be wasted while people make half their speech but muted. We've got two new members of the Assembly nominated by the university this afternoon, and I'd like to welcome Karen Kennedy and Lucy Scott to their first meeting. I think they're both on screen, and I think it would be very helpful for us if Karen and Lucy each just said a couple of sentences about their day job, as it were, which brings them here. Karen, would you like to go first?
Thank you. Yes, I'm Karen Kennedy. I'm Director of the University's Strategic Partnerships Office. So we're a central function within the university with a role of bringing strategy and coordination to the university's partnership activity, both with the public and private sectors. And that we have two teams within this function focused on one team focused on business partnerships, strategic business partnerships, and another function focused on public international partners, often with other peer academic institutions. And just to say, I'm also a Cambridge resident of about over 20 years now, so I have other connections to Cambridge.
Thanks very much, Karen. And Lucy.
Oh, hi, I'm Lucy Scott. I'm CEO for the Eastern Learning Alliance, and that consists of 4 secondary schools, so 3 of which are in Cambridge and 1 of which is in Norfolk, and a primary school as well. And we've also got 2 free schools that are in pre-opening within Cambridge as well. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Lucy, and welcome to you both. And I'd also like to welcome back Councillor Dave Bagent, who's replaced Councillor Mike Davey as one of the 3 City Council representatives on the Assembly. Members may remember Dave from his previous incarnation on the Assembly, so it's a return. And we also must, in the same breath, thank Councillor Davey for his contribution to the Assembly, in particular his all too short period as Vice Chair, which I was very grateful for. Just to change gear a moment, these are gloomy times, obviously, that we're all working through, but the positive thing we're here for this afternoon is we're amongst the people planning for the future, and I think a degree of optimism is worthy of note as we do that. Now on with the procedure. Item 1 on our agenda is apologies for absence. Do we have any?
Thank you, Chair. We've had apologies from Heather Richards, Helen Valentine, and Dr. Andy Williams.
Thank you very much. Item 2, we must appoint a new vice chairperson after Mike Davies' departure from the Assembly. So I would like to call for nominations for the vice chair. Are there any?
Mike Sargent is showing his hand.
Mike.
I'd like to propose the comeback kid, Councillor Dave Bagent. I'm hoping he's seen some changes since he was last here, and we're not going through exactly the same things as before, but yes, I'd like to propose Dave.
Thank you, Mike. Is there a seconder?
Sorry, I'm seconding Dave.
Okay, Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you.
Okay, I've got that. Thank you. So Councillor Bagent is proposed. Are there any further nominations? Don't see any. No hands raised. So I am going to just ask members to vote on that appointment to make that formal. Could you raise your hands, electronic hands, if you are in support of Councillor Bagent as Vice Chair? Well, I'm not seeing any hands, but
Yeah, the hands are all there, Chair. So that's agreed.
okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we've dealt with item 2 and go to item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest from members of the Assembly this afternoon?
Councillor Dave Bagent and Christopher Walkinshaw.
Dave?
Chair, yes, I'm a member of Cambridge Cycling Campaign.
Thank you. And Christopher Walkinshaw?
I'd just say I've recently been appointed the Director of Cambridge Ahead.
Thank you, Christopher. Any others? Okay, well, members can still declare any interest when we get to particular items if they recall anything that needs to be added. So thank you. Thank you. That's item 3. We then turn to the item 4, which is the minutes of the previous meeting. They're in your agenda pack starting on page 3. And I'm going to call the numbers here rather quickly. So please get to your electronic hands if you wish to raise any issue about the accuracy of the minutes, please. And we are talking about the accuracy of them. So page 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. And then is there anything on the appendix which deals with the questions? Okay, well, that's something of a record, because I think there has always been someone with a problem about the accuracy of the minutes before, but I will then propose to sign those when I get the chance physically to do so. Are there any objections to that? Thank you. Okay, so item 5 is questions from members of the public, and I will just run through what we've received and how I'm proposing that we deal with that. We've had 8 public questions which relate to our agenda, and therefore they've been admitted. I'm going to take 3 of those when we get to agenda item 7, the quarterly progress report. I'm going to take another 2 of those under the Greater Cambridge Partnership Future Investment Strategy item 8. And then I'm going to take 1 of them at item 9 on the public transport improvements and city access strategy. And when we get to item 11 on Greenways, a further 2 of them. So details of those questions have been published on the website and are available for both members of the Joint Assembly and the public to see. They're going to be read out by the Governance and Relationship Manager or asked by the by the questioner themselves at the start of the relevant agenda item. So we will be revisiting those periodically. Item 6 is petitions. I can report that there have been no petitions received. And so we get finally to the first item representing the meat of the meeting. So this is item 7, the quarterly progress report, which is in your agenda packs between pages 22 and 63. And I'd like to welcome Niamh Matthews, Head of Strategy and Programme, who is going to support us in this discussion. And I am going to start by just describing how we're going to sequence this so that everyone kind of understands where we are and where we're going. I'm going to take the 3 public questions first. Then I'm going to ask for the responses to those questions from the officers. Thirdly, I'm then going to ask Niamh to introduce the report. And then I'm going to explain how I suggest we structure our debate after that. And then we're going to have that debate. So that's what's ahead of us. But can we start with the 3 public questions, Wilma?
Yeah, Chair, can I just advise that the your notes suggest it's going to be Roxanne Debeau from Cam Cycle. These first questions are going to be asked by Anna Williams.
Okay, welcome Anna, and please go ahead with the first of them. And you have a time limit, I believe. You know that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for the time allowing us to speak at this meeting. Okay. So the first question regarding item 7, it's regarding item 10.8 under this category. So Cam Cycle would like to ask officers which of the 4 junctions in Cambridge have been selected for the smart signals trial. There are many areas in the city where those walking and cycling must undergo long waits or the need to press beg buttons, despite pedestrian and cycle flows being higher than motor traffic flows in some locations, or where non-motorised users have to navigate complicated 2-stage crossings. We'd like to know the criteria on which junctions have been selected for this trial. We would recommend that improving safety for those walking, cycling or wheeling must be the first concern, followed by a need to prioritise sustainable transport by improving the directness and convenience of key walking and cycling routes. Our second question is regarding the timescales for delivery of new sections of the cycle network. In previous meetings, we have stressed the need for accelerated delivery of the Greenways. And looking at table 11.1, we are concerned that the Eastern Access project is listed as due for completion in 2027. We hope that the aspects noted in the consultation as short-term actions that could be delivered by 2025, such as new segregated cycle lanes on Newmarket Road, could be rolled out much sooner than that, and in fact follow on from experimental measures to reallocate road space planned for phase 2 of the County Council's COVID-19 walking and cycling schemes. This is particularly important as there has been a fatality at the Barnwell roundabout already this year. We'd also like to ask about delays to the Chisholm Trail. Why has the opening of the jetty been moved to spring 2021? And is phase 2 still on schedule to complete in 2022 as listed? What are the designs for the route at the station end of phase 2? And I'd just like to say this is in context of, just want to thank everyone so much who has been involved in the recent installation of the Abbey Chesterton Bridge, because the community is very excited about the trail, and hence we're getting a lot of queries about the timescales. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Anna. Can I turn to Niamh now? Would you like to take us through the responses?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks, Anna, for your questions as well. So if I just run through them in the order that you asked them. So specifically, your first question on the junctions. So the following junctions have been selected as part of the trial. The Robin Hood Junction, the Cherry Hinton Road, Queen Edith's Way Junction is the first one. Hills Road, Brooklands Avenue Junction, Hills Road, Cherry Hinton Road Junction, and Cherry Hinton Road, Clifton Road Junction. So just to kind of run through a bit of the rationale for that. You may be aware that the Robin Hood Junction is being upgraded early next year with a kind of revised layout and new signal equipment, which should actually lend itself to the installation of new sensor equipment as part of the trial. So you probably know the junction's well used by local bus services, by pedestrians and cyclists, and actually we know that delays are experienced by all modes during peak periods in that area. So onto the latter 3 junctions. So these have been selected because of their close proximity, actually. So this will allow the pilot to test and kind of properly assess the coordination of the smart signal technology across a fairly small network of signal controlled junctions. So they're all, as you'll know, they're all located on kind of key public transport routes. They're heavily used by cyclists and pedestrians. And again, a bit like the Robin Hood Junction, they all experience pretty significant delays by users of all modes actually throughout the day. So along with it kind of assessing the benefits for sustainable transport modes and reviewing the impacts on delays for all modes, the trial will also try and look at and consider safety implications for kind of all users. That's the idea. So if we move to your second question, thanks Anna for that. So you picked up in your question actually that the consultation for Cambridge Eastern Access is currently ongoing. Actually, if there's support for the programme, then phase 1 will be substantively delivered during 23-24. And moving on then to the second part of your question on Greenways specifically. So the proposed programme for the delivery of all these schemes, it's a realistic forecast. It's actually heavily influenced by how land negotiations progress, and they can take some time. However, having said that, we previously committed to expedite scheme delivery where we can, and we'll continue to do that where it's possible to do that. And just your final question, specifically on the Chisholm Trail. So yeah, the opening of the jetty has been delayed to early 21 due to the ground conditions being a bit worse than pre-commencement investigations had actually indicated. As a result of the kind of poor ground conditions, we actually require increased temporary works and actually to facilitate the installation of a culvert to try and move that along. In terms of the schedule, a review of the delivery and programme for phase 2 is due to be carried out, and a new programme will be published as soon as that's finished, which will actually aim to deliver the trail alongside and aligned with other proposed developments in and around the area. Thank you, Chair. That's all from me.
Thank you very much, Niamh. And thanks very much, Anna, because I think it's very helpful that you brought those additional pieces of information out onto the table for us. So thank you very much.
Great, thanks for the clarifications.
Okay. And Niamh, would you like to go right on and introduce the report as a whole, please?
Yep, thank you, Chair. So this is the quarterly progress report. For those of you that are familiar with the meeting, you see this every time. For new folks here, this is a usual report that kind of tries to set out the progress across the whole of the GCP programme. So just a couple of quick intros. Sarah Haywood's here from the County Council to support us on any kind of specific questions around finance, and Gemma Schroeder's here from the SMART team to answer any specific questions on the SMART piece of the programme. So you'll see from the report there aren't actually any specific recommendations today. Sometimes there is, today there isn't. But actually, there are a couple of items I might draw your attention to. There was a long debate on skills at our last joint assembly. So just to kind of bring members back to that, the work that you passed through to the executive board on the new Meaning Foundation, and as well as on the substantive kind of skills procurement, is well underway and progressing as we had anticipated, I'm glad to say. And again, as usual, just to draw your attention actually to the only 2 red rag statuses that we've got across the programme. There's one on residence parking zones and one on the Cambourne to Cambridge project. that's a very quick intro. Worth saying as well, just on section 3, we continue to monitor the impact of COVID across the programme. There's a section there. Last time we talked about the work that we're doing on the kind of economic sub-recovery, which is ongoing as well. But just to remind the Assembly that that stuff's very much underway. I think, Chair, from me, that's a quick intro and ready for any questions that members might have.
Thank you very much, Niamh. So I will pick out straight away from what Niamh said, that in this report, there is not a specific recommendation that the board will be considering. So the input required from us across this report is entirely questions that any of you may have, or comments indeed that any of you may have as well, which we will transmit to the board later. The way I'm proposing that we handle this to keep the debate as focused as we possibly can get and not be talking across different subjects all at the same time is I'm going to do this by the sections of the report, so that first I'll invite any contributions relating to housing and strategic planning, pages 24 to 25, and then skills 26 to 28, then smart places 29 to 32, transport 33 to 38, and economy and environment 39 to 40. And then at the end, any matters that haven't been covered by that by those different sections, and in particular any of the general finance related issues at that stage. So it would really help if you kind of contained your contributions to when we get to each of those sections, and I will call them clearly when we get to them. So the first of those is in relation to housing and strategic planning on pages 24 and 25. Are there any questions or comments on that section, please?
So, Chair, there were a few hands that have gone down, I think, on the basis of you that way. So there are no hands currently showing for the housing and strategic planning section.
Okay, and there is no obligation to have questions or comments, but that's fine. We then come to skills, page 26 to 28.
Councillor Lucy Netzinger.
Councillor Netzinger.
This is that's including apprenticeships, I believe, because that's the bit that I wanted to ask about. So I think it talks. It looks like a very good, very positive report, which is excellent, and it talks about up to September, but I don't think that the figures that we've got cover September. I'm aware that in other places, a number of apprenticeship starts are really well down for this September, and I was just wondering whether that is reflected in our work as well, or whether we're doing better than lots of other places. So I just wondered if you could update us on whether on where we are with that this autumn, because I think it's a major issue in lots of areas, and I don't know whether there's anything more we can be doing. Probably not at this stage, but so sorry if that's a bit vague, but a little bit of an update, if possible, on where we are for this September would be really helpful.
Thank you, Lucy. Are there any other questions we can group with that?
None showing at the moment, Chair.
Okay, so Niamh, would you like to deal with that?
Yep, sure. Thanks, Councillor Netzinger, for your question. So the numbers, you're absolutely right. They're not up to the minute numbers. We will have them ASAP. The people that do the numbers tell us that at this time of year they take much longer than usual because there are so many of them at this time of year. We anticipate, as many other parts of the country are demonstrating, there will be a hit on the numbers, as I suppose as we might have expected. In terms of, I think, what we can do, or what we kind of do, the broader skills procurement stuff that you saw last time and that the board agreed is absolutely designed to pick up on that specific point as well as a number of others. So it will be very much interwoven into that work from the word go.
Thank you.
And when we do have the numbers, we'll, sorry.
That's what I was going to say. As soon as you've got the numbers, could
Yeah.
you put them over? I mean, I know that in some areas they seem to be down by half or even 2/3, which is really worrying, and something that I think we need to do everything we possibly can to try and pick that up and not wait till next September if it's at all possible. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Heather Williams would like to come in, Chair.
Go ahead, Heather.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to note on the first page, which is 26, on the number of students connected with employers and the progress and the target, with the fact that you've met that and you've exceeded that. I appreciate that the future is yet unclear, but I think it's worth noting the good work and what's been done by yourselves, the fact that you have exceeded that, and hopefully that will put us in good stead to cope with the challenges ahead. Just thought it was worth of note, Chairman. Thank you.
I agree, Heather. Neve, would you like to comment or not?
Thanks very much, and yes.
Good. No more hands up, I think. So moving from skills onto smart places. Are there any comments or questions on that section? That's page 29 through to 32.
Councillor Mike Sargent.
Mike, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of points, really. I was interested in the smart signalling because this seems to have been lasting quite a long time, getting us actually up to speed with delivering this. And I remember in a previous conversation with officers, there was issues with the county council. They were very worried about the impact of introducing this, and I think, to summarise, they might have even been running a bit scared on the impact. So have we got an open door now with the county council to progress this and indeed go past the first 4 signals? So what's the ongoing programme? And the other one is on wayfinding. Okay, I mean, one of the big issues at Cambridge Station, of course, is you come out and you're just faced with a rank of taxis. And I see that the wayfinding proposals are really around people walking. But as we know, particularly in Regent Street, it's difficult to social distance. And I think it's important that if we're going to be bringing in wayfinding in the short term, we do need to take social distancing into account. But I also note the reference to the biomedical campus. And I've certainly raised with the proposals for the South Station, how difficult it is for people to get around the biomedical campus and to outpatients and a whole range of other places. And I'm very conscious that when I get outpatient invitations, the main suggestion is that I come by car. So I think there are a range of other initiatives that we need to take to make sure that that people actually are encouraged to use alternative modes of transport, and some of that relies more on the sort of invitations that people get, in my case, to Addenbrooke's and also probably to Patworth as well. And that could help quite a lot if people are actually shown the different offers from places like the hospitals. Thanks.
Okay, sounds like a good Mike. We've got 2 other questions, I think. Yeah, 2 other points.
Yeah, so
Councillor Agent.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of points, and I may be out of sort on these, so you'll have to correct me if it's not really what the topic is about. Digital wayfinding. Has there been any consideration in moving from the station to the city centre, for example, of redirecting pedestrians through Mill Road? Because it's not a lot more distance, and it would be very beneficial for Mill Road traders to have people coming from the train, perhaps especially tourists coming onto Mill Road. So I'll start with that one, and if it's not anything to do with what we're talking about, I'll move on to the second question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Well, okay, second question is about the statistics for Mill Road bridge closure. I'm a bit disappointed that really they are not going to be available for the consultation that's taking place at this moment. I would have thought rather than suggesting that it might interfere with it. I think it would really help it for people to be able to know what the statistics are. And I'm wondering, whilst I'm asking that question, whether GCP has got a recommendation that it's going to put to the County Council about Mill Road Bridge, whether we take a view that actually, because it's promoting pedestrians and cycling and demoting cars, that we should actually perhaps have a view on that and that we should submit that to the County Council.
Okay, thanks very much, Dave. And I think Noel Kavanagh has got a question.
Yeah, this is to do with the autonomous vehicles on page
23.
23 is mentioned, and then later on. It's just in the intro earlier on, it said there was a delay, and it says something about a slowdown in the manufacture of vehicles. I was just wondering what the background to that was. But the core of the question is are these electric autonomous vehicles that are being trialled? Which I think is a very important question at this time when we're looking to move away from diesel and petrol-driven vehicles. So, thanks.
Thanks, Noel. I think those are all the questions and points indicated. So I'd ask Niamh if you would like to go through those three.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So we've got Gemma Schroeder here, who might just be able to cover a couple of the questions that were asked, and it could be that that Rachel covers off one of the final ones as well. Is Gemma there? Can I see her?
Yep,
Yes,
I'm here.
I can see Gemma. Would you like to go ahead, Gemma?
Yep, sure. I will try and answer the questions in the order they came. Do shout out if I miss anything. So starting off, Councillor Sargent, with your question about smart signals. Yes, we have been in discussion with the County Council about this. So while the trial will go ahead with just these 4 junctions at this time, yes, the door is open with the County Council to look at how they work in the future. You also asked a little bit about wayfinding and mentioned the taxis. This is also an ongoing piece of work. We have got some solutions up and running around the station area, and if I can just answer Councillor Bajent's question on this one at the same time regarding directing people to Bill Road. We've just established a new map that's gone up onto the wayfinding totem outside the station, which has a specific walking route which guides people across onto Mill Road and then down into the city centre that way. So yes, we have addressed that one. We're also looking at some other options that we may be able to put in place in the near future for that. Regarding wayfinding at the CBC though, I'm not sure if I can answer that one. Rachel, I don't know if you want to add anything or come back to it.
Yes, happy to, Chair, in that we have had recent discussions with CBC and made exactly those same points in terms of the current indication to people visiting the site that it leads you towards a car, and they are addressing that with people on the site to change website directions. But also we're looking to develop the pilot that we've done on wayfinding and make the biomedical campus, the rollout of that, so that we can support the campus in improving wayfinding there. So they are projects that are currently underway.
Thank you. It's back to Niamh for the rest, I think, is it?
I can cover off a couple more of the points there, sorry,
Go
regarding
ahead.
regarding the Mill Road Bridge data and also the AV trial. So the Mill Road Bridge data is all available. So we've made it publicly available and it is all still there. The only thing that we haven't done is to produce and send out the report that related specifically to the bridge closure that took place earlier in the summer. So all the data and the information regarding that is still available to anybody that wants to go and have a look at it. That will include all the data up until this recent period. And with regard to the autonomous vehicle trial, in answer to your question, yes, they are all electric vehicles.
Okay. Does that cover all of the points in the questions? Was there anything for you to come back on, Niamh?
Not that I can track.
Councillor Bajent may have.
Yeah, if you don't mind, with regards to the data and the report, is there any reason why the report's being held back. I mean, I know you say not to interfere with the consultation, but surely it would be useful. And again, I'll ask the same question, but this is not really an officer thing. I suppose this is for us councillors to talk about, is should the GCP actually take a view on what's happening on Mill Road Bridge? Should we be lobbying the county council? Because this is completely in line with the sort of thing that this GCP is in favour of: active travel, taking cars off the road. Even if it's only an experiment longer term, it shows us how much traffic gets discontinued because of a closure of a road. And this is the sort of thing that we need to be involved in.
I've got a hand up from Mike Sargent as well. Is it on the same point, Mike, or a different one? Different point.
Yeah.
Okay, so Niamh or someone, would you like to deal with Dave's point?
Peter can probably come in on that one.
We're in officer discussions with the county council, as you would expect, Councillor Bagent, regarding Mill Road and indeed all of the other closures. At the moment, we are not intending to bring a report forward to yourselves or indeed the executive board in terms of a formal response to Mill Road, because in terms of the division of work with the county council, we've been very clear. We've taken on board a number of their proposals and we are implementing them, and the county council has sought to take forward some of the others. So that's been the division of labour at the moment.
Okay, I'll go then to Mike Sargent.
Can I come back, please, Chair?
Oh, sorry. Yes, didn't see. Yeah, go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm just getting up to speed, but that's the officer's decision. But is that the decision of this assembly, that we shouldn't be involved in what's happening on Mill Road Bridge or in any other traffic closures? I mean, do other people think that it would be wise for us to actually be involved in this consultation? Or am I alone? I mean, I don't want to rock any boats, but I will.
Chair, if it helps, I mean, each of you as representatives of various bodies, councils, organisations, will clearly have the opportunity to feed into Mill Road and indeed all of the others, the consultations and discussions that are ongoing. In terms of the city deal, we have a very clearly defined programme, and that's what we use our powers that we borrow from the county council to take forward. Mill Road is not in our programme. So I think it may well be quite difficult for me as an officer to come forward with a report on something that doesn't fall clearly within our bailiwick.
I'd be interested to hear if any other councillors have an opinion on that.
Well, I'm ready to take hands up on that item, but I'm still only looking at Mike's hand up on a different matter at the moment. So let me go to Mike and see if anyone else has thought about it in a minute.
Yeah, I just want to push my point, Chair, with Rachel about Addenbrooke's and Patworth, because it's not around websites, it's the letters and the leaflets and all the other bits and pieces you get from the hospital, encouraging you to go to a car park, basically. And it's quite difficult to find alternative measures, really. So I think it's the whole package, let alone the fact, and as I've raised with the Greater Cambridge Partnership, the Greater Cambridge Planning Department and the people responsible for that campus, that the site is not very well signposted, and it's not very porous, of course. I understand there are plans afoot to make the whole site much better for people to get around, but I think there are short-term opportunities to tip the balance a little bit towards alternative forms of transport.
Yes, Chair, if I could just say, absolutely, we'll emphasise that point to them. They're also looking for some community representatives to help give them some views about the wayfinding. So I think I'll put your name forward if that's all right, Mark.
Okay, I've got two more hands up now. Councillor Nethsinger, followed by Councillor Wilson.
My point is just to respond to Dave's point about involvement in the consultations. I think I agree with Peter on this. I'm afraid that actually we do all have the opportunity to respond as individuals to these consultations, and that form of consultation is particularly intended to allow the individuals and the residents in the area to make their voices heard. I'm not sure that it's really appropriate for us as a major organisation to get involved in that. I think I get as frustrated with the county council as anybody else, probably rather more so. But I just think that on this occasion, that particular consultation is designed for individuals, and we should respond as individuals. Thanks.
Thank you, Lucy. Eileen Wilson.
I just wanted to respond to what Councillor Mike Sargent was saying about people accessing Addenbrooke's by car. This isn't for this particular paper, but I'd just like to reiterate the things that I've said before, is that for some of the communities around Cambridge, it's very difficult to get to Addenbrooke's by public transport. And I hope that as part of the access to Cambridge, those problems that people experience where they have to get 2 buses and change in the middle of Cambridge, and otherwise takes a very, very long time to get to Addenbrooke's, and people miss their appointments. So that is why for a great number of people the car is actually the best option.
Thank you. Heather Williams.
Thank you. It was just on the point, as we've been asked our views about responding in the consultation. I think, we're called this assembly and the board is the Greater Cambridge Partnership, and that relies on the 3 partners really and others. And I think if we were to start sort of going beyond our remit, as explained by Peter, then that wouldn't quite be appropriate for what we are. We're not a lobbyist group. So to start lobbying in other matters, I think could set quite a dangerous precedent as to where do we then, what do we then lobby for or against or anything else. So I can understand the enthusiasm to get involved, but as has been said, I think it's best as individuals or, as the individual partners, South Cambs, Cambridge City, the county, whoever it may be, but not as an assembly or board. That's my view. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Heather. So I have no further hands up. I think people have had a chance to kind of respond to Dave's challenge. So I think I have to leave it there, Dave, on that point. And I think all other issues have had a response. So I think we will bundle up the contributions made and reflect that appropriately to the board, and then move on to the next section. So that is the section on transport, which runs from 33 through to 38. And I wanted at the start of that to, because as Niamh indicated earlier, 2 of the obvious issues here are the 2 items which have red indicated by them on the first page of this section. I just wanted, because I think it would be helpful for the Assembly to ask a couple of questions which might help further thought. On the Cambourne to Cambridge project, and I'm looking at section 12 here on page 34, I wonder if officers could give us an update on the current position with the combined authority on this project. And also, and related to that, there is a reference in 12.1 to a technical comparison of alternative routes. And I wonder if officers could tell us what that technical comparison says, and to know when that will be released into the public domain. And then I may have a suggestion to make after hearing about that. Thank you. Who would like to deal with that?
Well, Chair, I'll deal with it. So in terms of the position with the combined authority and the technical report, what we've tried to do is to give a sort of an update following the combined authorities Transport and Infrastructure Committee meeting earlier this month. In that committee meeting, as you suggested, it was confirmed that a technical review had been undertaken of the combined authorities' preferred proposals. This was a comparison of the preferred indicative route from the combined authority with the GCP's current proposals. That report is a combined authority report. So I think it's important that it's left to them to put into the public domain. And indeed, they agreed that they would do so at the request of one of the members of the Transport Committee in the 4th of November. So I hope that will be in the public domain in the near future. What combined authority officers did say at the meeting is they did confirm some of the details in terms of the general appraisal. There were a number of criteria they suggested the appraisal was undertaken against, and on none of the criteria did the indicative proposals for the combined authority perform better than the GCP proposals, but on a number of them they scored worse. That's all that was said at the combined authority committee meeting, Chair, and I think it's only fair that we wait for them to put it into the public domain to hear any more of that.
Okay, well, thank you, Peter, for that. I mean, and your report says that there is no further work going on that alternative proposal. What I wanted to ask the Assembly if it would consider in the process of the discussion we're going to have is whether they would agree that we do ask the board, given the fact that this alternative appears to have hit the buffers, that we do ask the board to determine what the next steps now are in relation to this project. And I'm saying that without inviting us to rerun previous debates on this project here. And I'm aware that there are difference of views, although there's been an established consensus amongst the majority. But I am believing that all sides would like to know what next steps are and would like the board to engage and determine that without further delay. So I just put that on the table. It's not a conclusion, it's a suggestion. But I think it would be helpful for the clarity of public policy on this really large and important scheme. So I have a number of hands up, the first of which is from Councillor Bagent. Dave.
Sorry about talking a lot, I will. But I think that if I'm correct in thinking, the Mayor failed to get a seconder for his proposal, even on his own committee. And that now that is out of the way, so to speak. I think as I left this committee 18 months ago, the Mayor had just stopped us from progressing this. And I'm agreeing with you, Tim, really. I'm just adding some more to it. I think we should now unpause this, ask for the board to unpause it and get on with getting this route that was well consulted on and almost ready to go. We should get that underway. And I think the Mayor's wholly failed. I have the opportunity here to say what a failure. He's held us up for 18 months and then hasn't produced anything that was acceptable. So I'd just like to see this a recommendation from us to say it's unpaused and we get underway back onto the route that we were going to be using. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. And I've got Mike Sargent.
Yeah, I'm supportive, Tim and Dave, of recommending to the board that we do crack on. It is vital that we get this route up and running. I was in a meeting with East West Rail today. We want to make sure that we're dovetailing with what they're doing as well. And having worked at the West Cambridge site, I know that most of my colleagues there who lived in Cambourne were driving in. The sooner we can get this moving forward, the better. But that wasn't the main reason I was commenting, actually. On page 33, I don't know if I've got the sense of it quite right, but I was surprised Madingley Road cycling wasn't on there. Is that because it's the stage at which it's at? So I'd like clarification. Perhaps while it's still at consultation, it doesn't appear there. I want to also raise an issue which officers are aware of, my concern in terms of Histon Road bus priority, which I think impacts how people might view going forward with Milton Road, for instance, because although we were assured before the work on Histon Road started that diversions would be put in place to get people onto Milton Road rather than Histon Road, I'm afraid the overhead gantries, the last time I came down the A14, which was the day before lockdown, still tell you to come off at the Histon Road junction to get to Cambridge. And I've not had a reply to tell me that it's because of Highways England that we can't actually remove that reference to that being the route into Cambridge. And all there is a yellow and black sign, quite small, which would be quite easy for motorists to miss. So this is causing major issues in the road network in the north of the city, places like Arbury Road, for instance, which is causing issues for cycling as well. So I would like to see that resolved. And I think that's all, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I've got a further list of questioners: Councillor Kavanagh, Councillor Wilson, Christopher Walkinshaw and Heather Williams. I'm just asking officers, though they know who they are, to be rolling up their answers so that I can call on you at the end of this list. So I'll go ahead with the list. Councillor Kavanagh.
Thanks. Yeah, on page 37, there's reference to the residence parking schemes implementation, and there's mention of the fact that there's a review being undertaken. I was just wondering, is there any information about how that review of the residence parking schemes, the existing residence parking schemes, is going? And you know, any indication when the outcome is going to be made public? Behind my question is the fact that there are many residents very impatient to know what is going to happen about residence parking schemes, particularly those who were very much in favour of schemes that were moving towards final consultations and so on. And we need to have a resolution on this as soon as possible. I know it was a county council decision to suspend the development of new schemes, but we can't get away from the fact that there are huge numbers of residents who did vote to have residence parking schemes who are very angry about the fact that nothing is being said about them since the suspension came in at the beginning of this year. Thanks. Oh, it's also quite good to see there is a 200k saving, but I think people would rather have that 200k being spent on the implementation of residence parking schemes. Thanks.
Thank you, Noel. That's a brilliant question. We'll go to Councillor Eileen Wilson now. We can't hear Eileen.
Sorry, I muted and unmuted myself at the same time. Sorry about that. On the Cambourne to Cambridge, I came into this assembly just as Councillor Bajent was leaving, and so I was there when a hiatus happened on the Cambourne to Cambridge, and I think there's been far too much prevarication, and we know the reason why, and it doesn't do anyone any favors, the people who oppose it or the people who support it. And I think this is just something that has got to go forward to the executive board so that people who feel that they might be affected by it one way or another have some sort of certainty about the environment they're living in their homes, so that is the point about the Cambourne to Cambridge. I have a couple of questions. On 1311 on page 37, there's a reference to travel hubs. At the beginning, there was a proposal for a travel hub at Oakington, and there was a question mark about it, but we've heard nothing further. So I was wondering whether that has been something that has been completely dismissed and it won't come back again. My third question is about Histon Road. When those works are being proposed, I raised a number of concerns about sixth formers travelling to Hills Road and Long Road and the potential worsening of their already very long bus journey. I was wondering whether we could have an update on whether that's likely to be brought forward for the completion of those works, and whether it would be in good time for when we move, hopefully, into a post-COVID situation and sixth formers can get back to normal study times and normal timetables, and perhaps those Histon Road works will be over so that they aren't impacted even further than they've already been impacted by the COVID situation. Thank you.
Thanks, Eileen. Christopher Walkinshaw.
Chair, thank you very much. Just very briefly to support your suggestion right at the beginning of this section, that it's really important that we get Cambourne to Cambridge back on track and as quickly as possible so that it can be delivered. Whatever that route is, I would urge whatever has to be done to get it on track so that we follow the proper process and get this done. It's really important.
Thank you, Chris. Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chairman. Just on the C2C, I think it's that a lot of the issues that I know I've raised is through lack of information on environmental impacts. So I would support the GCP getting the environmental impact assessment so we can really see what the impact of that route is going to be. But also, I understand the urgency from members of the Assembly, but I think it's actually really important that we reassure people as well that by the GCP having its environmental impact assessment, which is my understanding is the next step, that isn't a final decision. Because I could understand, not intentionally, but listening to this debate, that people think actually as an Assembly we're supporting and just going to push it through and that the next steps will just be rushed. So I think it's really clear, or we need to be very clear that that's not what's going to happen, or from my point of view, that's not what I want to see. I want to see a fair and environmental impact assessment. I want to know all of the options for mitigation, particularly around the trees and Coton, because this is people's where they live, it impacts their lives. So we need to give that reassurance that we're not going to be interfering in that or trying to boulder something through, that's going to be fair and it's going to assess all options, and that this isn't the end, that there will be further time for consultation and further time for the actual final route to be decided. So I just want to stress that point, because there'll be many people watching this that would probably be quite uneasy with the way this discussion has gone. I'd also like to say that if an alternative route does appear from the combined authority, might not be the one that's currently proposed, I think in the essence of fairness as well, if the GCP is asked to look at it, that we should, because I think that's a responsibility that we should do if we're asked to, and that it should come to the Assembly as well as the board if that was to happen. And I think that would be the only way to be fair, because we have heard at these meetings as well a lot of support for alternatives and northern routes, and we owe them a service as well on this partnership, to make sure that we listen to that. And I think that would help with the public perception, because otherwise it looks like we're just ploughing through and not caring, which I'm sure is not the case. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, Heather. I very much agree with your first point there, and I suspect Peter will want to come in and make a comment later about the second point. I now have Ian Sollum and Lucy Nethsinger. Ian, would you like to go?
Thanks, Chair. And I mean, in terms of the way that you sort of very carefully worded your suggestion, and I appreciate that it's something that actually I think all of us can get behind, highlighting really just what Councillor Williams just said. There are a range of opinions, and there are some really very real concerns and complexities associated with this project, and that the board shouldn't ignore simply because the combined authority didn't get it quite right in terms of what suggestion they were bringing forward in terms of what happens now. So it is for the board to propose a way forward out of this impasse, and really I think that's focused on what's the process from here to address these concerns, but also move us on from just complete stasis. So I certainly endorse the form of wording that you suggested in that regard. Just a broader question, as sort of there are other things on the transport piece. Just on the west of Cambridge package, it suggests that we should have that before the planning committee by the end of the year. I think there's only one more meeting of the county planning committee. So is that definitely in the calendar now? And just on a broader point, I guess, with a lot of the transport issues, just a question for Peter as to whether there's any implications from the Heathrow terminal through the Heathrow third runway decision earlier in the year in terms of the demonstrating progress towards net zero. I think many of of our projects are aligned with that because we're trying to encourage modal shift, but maybe the west of Cambridge package sort of stands out as potentially just looking like a big car park, and exactly how that fits. There are definite concerns around what happens at the junction, but just invite sort of what the considerations are of how we address that potential issue.
Okay, thank you very much, Ian. And the last name I've got is Lucy Netzinger. After Lucy, I'm going to rule a line because everyone will have had a chance to speak who wanted to, and then we're going to turn to the officers for patching together the responses. Lucy, go ahead.
Okay, so I share the frustration that I think has been expressed all round at what happened at the Combined Authority. I do think it's pretty unimpressive to have called for that pause and had a long time to do some work and then produced a piece of work that you can't even find a seconder for. So I think that there is a sense of frustration on this project from all sides. And I agree that we need to make sure that if the Combined Authority isn't going to manage to progress this, that the board does some work on it. But I also think it's really important that we recognise that there has been consistent and effective opposition to the current route, and we haven't managed to progress the current route. There are various bits of it that have been progressed and that have been where some kind of consensus has been reached, and that has actually changed the project. So we need to look at the fact that the current site, the original site for the park and ride, has now moved, and there is quite a lot of support for the current site for the park and ride, and that's progress. That's really good. What there isn't support for, and what there is still very considerable concern about, is what happens after that and on the way into Cambridge. And I do think it's really important that we recognise that opposition, and that opposition hasn't gone anywhere. And if we are going to progress this project, simply looking at that single route and carrying on in the direction that we've going, kind of plugging away as if nothing had happened with the mayor and that opposition, I don't think is productive. So I think we do need to send this back to the board for more work, but that work needs to perhaps be broader than has been the case in the past. So that would be my request, that yes, the board look at it, but can we please look at it perhaps in a a broader sense, not just as Dave was suggesting at the start, carrying on with what we were doing before, because I think that there's a danger that we're banging our heads against a brick wall on that one. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, to deal with all of that from the officers, should I turn to you, Niamh, and for you to be the maestro, to call in colleagues when required, or respond yourself?
I may need some support in responding. So in the order that I've got them, I think the first question was from Councillor Sargent on Madingley Road. That's the bit that I picked up. It's noted on page 34, Councillor Sargent. So if you want to run through any of that, let us know. Then I'd probably call in Peter to get to Councillor Kavanagh's question on resident parking zones.
Should I do the rest, Niamh?
That's probably wise.
So signage, point noted, we'll take it away. And as Councillor Sargent knows, we've been toing and froing with Highways England on signage throughout the nature of the project. In terms of residents parking, Councillor Kavanagh, absolutely right. This was a county council decision. The decision was a temporary decision, so they agreed to review it in the early part of 2021. We expect to be involved in that review as it takes place, and it will be reported to you, I hope, at your next meeting in terms of what the provisional outcomes are likely to be in terms of residents parking. Councillor Wilson, in terms of the Oakington Travel Hub, that scheme has not progressed. The board, yourselves or the board, haven't taken a decision to stop the scheme altogether, but the scheme has simply not progressed, and it currently stands there are no plans to progress that at the moment. With regards to Histon Road, we are still on track for completion next summer, which clearly will deal with the future academic year. As you know, we've got an agreement with Stagecoach whereby we continue to keep the bus travel times under review, and we've said that we would want to go in and provide more support if they get far too difficult during the course of scheme delivery. But obviously the impact of the virus has had an impact on certain travel movements, but that will continue at the moment. Councillor Williams, I think, makes an incredibly important point around the next step if the board decides to move forward to the next step in terms of the current Cambourne to Cambridge proposals. Because the next step is not to agree the proposals. It's to agree to undertake a detailed environmental impact assessment and consultation. And now we've got a little bit of more flavour to that because we're already in that process in terms of Cambridge South East. And that will allow you and will allow the board to then consider the position before I finally come forward with a set of proposals. And the idea behind the environmental impact assessment, it's the first statutory phase of scheme delivery. It deliberately requires us to come forward with design proposals, mitigation proposals, and seek to answer all of challenges that are laid before us in doing that. So that is absolutely the next stage in the process if the board decide that that's what they want to do next. It's certainly not a final decision on the route proposals. The issue of comparison of alternatives, which Councillor Williams talks about, and then I think Councillor Netzinger then comes in with a similar point, I think is an interesting one, and you will have all heard me say verbatim, and I'm going to say it again. There is a prescribed process we must follow. It's in place. We're obliged to follow that from the Department for Transport, and the examination of alternatives at this point is difficult, and it's difficult because it doesn't follow the prescribed process. That is not to say we can't, and the decision that the executive board took following the mayor and the combined authorities intervention was to allow that opportunity to take place. So that can only be considered should alternatives come forward. That said, I'll just revert back to my previous answer. As part of the environmental impact assessment, there will be, of course, a number of conversations, discussions, and design issues that we will pick up that relate to a number of the concerns that stakeholders and communities have. So that's the sort of the next step if the board chooses to do that. In terms of Councillor Solom's point on West Cambridge, up until 10:30 this morning, Councillor Solom, I was on track to go to the final planning committee of the year. Unfortunately, I have been informed it will actually now go to January. I will amend the text on the progress report for the next meeting. You're absolutely right to suggest that the Heathrow decision will have implications for all major schemes up and down the country, and I would be so bold as to suggest that we haven't yet, and I say this as a practitioners across the UK, fully got our heads around the implications of that decision, because it is profound. And I think, as you suggest, it particularly relates to carbon heavy and private vehicle transport schemes, so big road schemes, but nevertheless it will impact on the schemes that we're looking to deliver, and we must consider that. And I will add, because at some point somebody else will add it, we will also be obliged to consider the implications of COVID and what that is doing and what that is telling us. And I'm sure this will feed out in terms of the conversation we have later on around city access. I hope I've answered all of the questions, Chair, but if I've missed any, I'm happy to provide further clarification.
Thank you, Peter. I see Rachel wants to add something.
Yes, I just wondered, Chair, whether it might be helpful for Peter to clarify what he said about why it wouldn't be compliant in process terms to consider alternatives at this stage. There are a number of new members of the Assembly. Is it worth just indulging you a minute longer to explain what happened at the start of the process some years ago, where alternatives were considered?
I'm pleased it's not only me asking people to look at the history, but yes, why not, Peter, if you could do that, please.
Thank you, Chair. So in a nutshell, the prescribed process we are obliged to follow is to essentially to analyse, to consult, and to sift through all of the possible options. So you continue to refine an option till you get to a single route alignment. And you're supposed to do this sequentially through a series of phases, a strategic case or an outline case, and you follow that process. Coming on and turning sort of a dogtail left and deciding you're now going to do something different is outwith of that process. It is clearly something that Department for Transport officials will challenge, and if we ever get to a planning inquiry, the inspector will ask us a series of questions as to why we've done that. So there needs to be a very clear justification for going outwith of the process that we're obliged to follow. We produce an astonishing amount of technical information. It's all available on the website. It's a lengthy read, I think it's fair to say, but that seeks to support the decisions that have been made, in this case on this scheme, over the last 5 years by the executive board. So the process is there to best deliver the schemes across the UK, not just in terms of Greater Cambridge. And we need to be mindful of that, because ultimately when we ask for planning powers, or indeed most others ask for funding, then we'll be obliged to demonstrate we followed closely the prescribed scheme for delivery.
Thank you. I'm going to take only the two more hands that have just appeared, and then we will move on. Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chairman. I hear what's been said about the process, but also what was said doesn't mean we can't. And I think it's really important that actually for wider public interest, that if something does come forward, that the public know that we're not just going to plough on, and we will comparison, and that we are not afraid to do the right thing by them. So I'd just like to emphasise that part of what was said as well. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. And Dave Bagent. Dave, we can't hear you.
I know, I'm chasing my mouse across the screen. Sorry about that. I don't want to go on about this, but like you said, there's history here. We looked at, I think, 4 routes. We sort of narrowed it down to 1, and had the mayor not intervened, we would have been a considerable way along the line here. And I think it would be unfair for people to for councillors to be talking about, oh, there may be other schemes, and raising hopes with people that there are other ways of doing this. Of course, somebody may come up with another scheme, but I think we considered everything that was available at the time, and I don't see why any of that would have changed. And I'd hate to see us go down another 5 years of reviewing new plans, but I'm sure that the management board will look at this as well. But I think it would be unfair to set hairs running to say there are other ways of making the grass grow longer around these schemes. I don't think there are. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dave. So I'm going to rule a line under that that part of the discussion on this report, and thank you very much for the contributions. Well, what I do feel is appropriate based on that conversation on your behalf is to say to the board that the Assembly is keen to see a solution come forward on this scheme and urges the board to determine next steps. And I know that some of you would like to say some more as well, but I think in the interests of something that we could all agree on, it would be sensible to limit it to that, because our past debates and decisions and recommendations on this scheme are a matter of public record already. And I really don't think we're going to add much more at this point by kind of rehearsing those with each other all over again. But that may happen again in the future, who knows. So I'm going to turn over now to the next part of this report, economy and environment. Are there any contributions on that? So I don't see any, and I'm quickly going to turn the page again, and we get to any other comments on the quarterly report that haven't been covered so far. And I don't see any of those either. So we have in fact finished that only the first report, but I think it was useful to get everyone's contributions on that. So we now come to item 8, which is the GCP Future Investment Strategy, pages 64 to 140 in your pack. And I think Isabel Wade, Head of Transport Strategy, is going to support us in this item. So more from her in a minute. I'm going to first ask for public questions. We also have a question here from a member of one of our partner councils. I'm going to get officer responses to those contributions. I'm going to ask Isabel to introduce the report, and then we will have our discussion. So could we have the public question, please?
Yes, Chair, I'm going to start by reading a question received from Linda Worth on behalf of the British Horse Society. The question reads as follows. Active travel is defined in the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Local Transport Plan as walking, cycling and horse riding. I very much appreciate the GCP's use of this term in these meeting documents. However, the GCP definition of active travel on page 175 is any means of travelling that requires physical activity such as cycling or walking. Since the GCP's projects need to comply with the LTP, the definition should be the same. The discrepancy between these two definitions is important because every reference to active travel improvements across Greater Cambridge calls for improvement of the cycle network. This Assembly has been informed on several occasions of the negative and dangerous impact on horse riders created by improvement to the cycle network, which excludes provision for equestrians. The GCP Sustainable Transport Programme acknowledges the need for equestrian provision and states, the GCP is creating safe and easy routes for more active travel journeys to accommodate Greater Cambridge's growing number of cyclists, along with those walking and horse riding. Yet, paragraph 3.6 of the report on page 71 of the agenda pack states, firstly, recognising the opportunity to encourage active travel and build on the emergency measures and existing GCP spend commitments, it is proposed that an application is made to enable targeted investment in gaps in the cycling network. Planned investments through the GCP programme, as well as by partners, will significantly improve the cycling network across Greater Cambridge. It's essential that any investment to resolve gaps or make improvements are to the active travel network in Greater Cambridge to benefit and for the benefit and safety of all active travellers. This includes the reallocation, this includes road space reallocation projects. Please will board members approve this hugely significant change? That's the end of that question. And next on the list is Roxanne on behalf of Cambridge Cycling Campaign, who's with us.
Hello, Roxanne. Would you like to ask your question?
Yes, please. Thanks for having me. We're doing shift changes today, so you'll see different faces. Okay, this is our question. CamCycle is pleased to see recognition of the important role cycling can play in addressing local issues and contributing to GCP goals in the Future Investment Strategy report. It's clear that people want to cycle more. The government wants people to cycle more. Businesses expect their employees to cycle more, and public feedback from consultations and the Citizens' Assembly recognise cycling's role in tackling air pollution, congestion, and climate change. We therefore strongly welcome the proposal for new investment to enable targeted investment gaps in the cycling network and new criteria assessing whether transport schemes support the delivery of net zero carbon objectives across Greater Cambridge. Would like confirmation that this investment will be led by the forthcoming local cycling and walking investment plan, and ask when the plan will be published. Also, will investment in routes be spread across links within the city and out in the wider region so that rural communities share the benefit of improvement to active travel links? Thank you.
Thank you, Roxanne. And I think I should now welcome Councillor Susan van der Ven back to the Assembly. Hello, Susan.
Hello, hi.
So you're a member of the County Council, and you'd like to address the Assembly.
Yes, please. Thank you. I have a question with a bit of background. It is Cambridgeshire County Council Highways has severely limited resources to carry out its statutory obligations. Over the past few years, verge cuts along multi-use paths have been reduced to twice per year, and surface water drains are no longer subject to regular scheduled maintenance. This situation is unlikely to change in the foreseeable future. Valuable learning on path maintenance has taken place along the A10 corridor between Hoxton and Melbourne, where the GCP put its first spade into the ground and which forms the basis for the forthcoming Melbourne Greenway. The ambitious Greenway scheme is extremely welcome and stands to transform the opportunity for safe cycling in the Greater Cambridge area. Of particular note is the synergy between Greenway schemes and the inclination to create networks rather than standalone routes. How will the GCP ensure that the Greenway scheme, once built, will be properly looked after in order to stand as a truly strategic asset for a future multimodal transport network? Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. So could I turn to you, Isabel, to respond?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to answer the first two questions and then turn to Peter just to pick up on Councillor van der Ven's question. So first of all, thank you, Linda, very much for your question. And I just want to reassure you that the GCP does use the definition of active travel as set out in the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Local Transport Plan. Turning then to the question from Roxanne and CamCycle. So the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan will be a key factor in deciding where to invest additional funding in the transport network, in the active travel network, alongside other factors such as feasibility and value for money. There isn't kind of currently a decision about exactly which schemes should go forward. That work still needs to happen, including kind of taking views from people. But the idea is that you know we'll gather views and that will inform exactly where those investments are made. And as you know, obviously our programme at the moment does cover investment across the Greater Cambridge area, including the Greenways going out to the villages, and it's intended that this work would look at gaps across the whole of the Greater Cambridge area as well. Just in terms of the question about when the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan will be published, that work is, and that plan, the development of that is led by the County Council, and they are aiming to consult on the plan in the new year.
Thanks, Isabel.
And in terms of Councillor van der Ven, GCP, we are looking and working closely with county colleagues to put in place the necessary resources for longer term management and maintenance of the new infrastructure. So that process is ongoing. As soon as we've finalised it, then I'll be happy to update you and indeed the wider Joint Assembly on exactly what the plan is.
Okay, so thank you very much, Peter. Susan, you actually do have the right to say some more if you want to, but I don't know, you may feel you got the answer you wanted.
We'll see if I get the answer I want. No, that's very encouraging. I'm intrigued to know more about this, and I look forward to hearing more about it as soon as you're able to update us.
Okay, thank you very much, Susan and Roxanne and Linda as well. So we will then go on to the report, and Isabel, you're going to present that to us.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the Future Investment Strategy report, the purpose of the Future Investment Strategy is to outline how the GCP will make investments over the period of the whole of the city deal. So looking at how we can maximise the benefits to residents and to businesses in Greater Cambridge. And the Joint Assembly will remember, for those of you who were there at the time, will remember discussing an initial Future Investment Strategy last year, and it was agreed by the board in March 2019. So what we've done is we've reviewed the Future Investment Strategy in the light of the successful Gateway review earlier this year, but also particularly in the light of COVID-19, and it's presented in this paper for your comments. So the aim here is to respond to the current evidence base, and particularly the evidence that we're seeing around the impact of COVID on both the economy and on transport and travel, and to look at kind of how we achieve the GCP's legacy in that context. The evidence, which I'll come on to, does present some challenges for us at this time. Things have changed a huge amount in the last 6 months. And so the Future Investment Strategy responds by proposing that we continue with our significant investment in sustainable transport infrastructure. It's a key part of supporting a green recovery in this area. We also have targeted interventions across our programme, including on skills to support the economy to recover. But overall, we take a flexible approach so that GCP is in the best position to respond to the pandemic and to kind of the circumstances as we emerge from the pandemic as well. So just to start with the evidence. So I know that the Joint Assembly always tells us that we need to follow the evidence, and that's exactly what we've tried to do with this review. So there, as I said, it's clear there's been a significant impact both on the economy and on travel and transport in our area from COVID-19. So we've been closely monitoring economic indicators, and we have seen some early indications of impact, including rises in claimant counts, different kind of job postings picture to last year. So some sectors still doing well, but other sectors quite down. And overall kind of a lower footfall, lower movements, leading to less economic activity in the city as well. And it's likely that through the winter we're going to see further impacts as a result of the restrictions too that have come in. Alongside that, we're closely monitoring the transport data, and that has shown that people are returning to their cars faster than they have done to other modes. And obviously that has implications for the GCP's transport strategy going forward. There's high levels of home working in our area, but in the kind of medium, longer term, the indications are that people will still want to go into a workplace a lot of the time. There's a lot of businesses in Cambridge where access to a workplace, is important. So public transport is still going to be vital to our economy in the long term, both in terms of kind of the environmental pressures that we're facing, but also in terms of growth and the sort of growth that we have in this area, and people still needing to move into access employment areas. What we have seen though is a huge impact of the pandemic on public transport. It's had more impact on kind of public transport than on any other mode. Patronage remains significantly below where it was, and government is having to support public transport at the moment to keep going. So there isn't a great deal of certainty either over what public transport will look like in the future in terms of kind of the funding environment, the operational environment, the regulatory environment. It's a very uncertain time for that, and I think that that does kind of pose some challenges to us in terms of how we go forward on that. It's also clear that there is, their air quality has been a concern in this area, and it remains a concern. Some of the analysis that we've done of the data during COVID has shown that there's, air quality and pollution has kind of increased since traffic levels started going back up. And there is a correlation between kind of higher traffic levels and higher numbers of buses as well, and air quality issues in the city. So as well as what is happening now, the future investment strategy is also trying to look forward. And as I've said, this part is more challenging. There's a huge range of views about what the future of transport might look like and the impact of the pandemic on kind of accelerating or changing trends. What we do know is that investment in public transport, is important in terms of supporting economic recovery, and will be important in terms of, offering people a sustainable alternative coming out of COVID. What we have also done to try and get a bit of a sense of what's happening locally is we worked with Cambridge Ahead to do a survey of businesses asking about their plans for things like working from home, travel into the office, workspace locations over the not kind of in the pandemic time, because actually that's quite hard, but in 3 to 5 years, post-pandemic, has the pandemic changed how businesses want to operate in the future? And actually what we found with this was that although the businesses that responded did indicate that they were thinking of more home working and more cycling, actually we had a very low take up, and those businesses that did respond were quite uncertain. So I think the key message from the survey is that actually businesses didn't feel able at this time to kind of say exactly how they were going to change or otherwise how they were working as a result of that pandemic. And so I think the key message from that is that, yes, some change is anticipated, but actually uncertainty as to when we will see that, what that will look like and what sort of scale that will be on. So that's kind of some of the data. Alongside that, the reviews also considered the updated environmental objectives and evidence that has come forward, including since we last did the future investment strategy, all 3 of our partner councils have made commitments to net zero carbon. And it's clear that a shift to sustainable travel is needed to meet these. So the GCP programme is a key part of achieving that, and the review has also reflected on that too. So the future investment strategy that is updated is produced very much in this context, and it's trying to strike a balance between investing to support a green recovery and remaining mindful of the uncertainty facing, in particular, public transport, but also the economy more widely. Basically, the review found that the programme agreed in 2019 does remain vital to the success of the area, but it did identify a small number of gaps where some additional activity is needed, and I'm just going to kind of run through those now. So firstly, a greater emphasis on environmental objectives, including demonstrating how the city deal will support improvements to air quality and net zero carbon. Secondly, recognising the opportunity to support the uptake of active travel, given the positive uptake of this during the pandemic, and also new government support and guidance about the active travel offer to try and get more people taking that up. There's also continued need to be able to respond to kind of forthcoming issues arising as a result of the pandemic, such as the work that we've done on skills, and then recognising that the current circumstances require a flexible approach and looking at how we build that into the programme. The final area is just kind of recognising that in the current circumstances, one of our core city deal purposes was to kind of identify and unlock barriers to sustainable growth, so making sure that we retain some capacity to be able to do that at the moment. In terms of what that means as allocations, the reviews proposed several new allocations. So firstly, in terms of active travel, recognising that opportunity, and as kind of mentioned by in some of the questions that we had, it proposes making an allocation of targeted investment towards addressing gaps in the cycling network. Obviously, there's already significant investment in cycling in the programme, but this would there will still be some gaps, and this would look to address those so that people found that their whole journey was, you know, covered by a good route, rather than having a good route for some of it and then finding that there's, you know, there's a bit that puts them off and that discourages people from cycling. So intended to address that. Secondly, funding, there's a funding allocation to enable operator investment in a new zero emission bus fleet for Greater Cambridge. So this is again responding to the data around a correlation between increasing bus numbers and air quality. And it's also kind of looking ahead to an expansion in terms of public transport, whereby, you know, if we have a lot more buses in Cambridge, they're going to need to be cleaner than they are at the moment in order to not cause air quality issues. So looking at how we could support operators to clean up their fleet over time. Just in terms of transport, the 29 Future Investment Strategy made an allocation of £75 million towards public transport service improvements. And that was based on previous analysis that we'd done that demonstrated service enhancements are needed to make public transport competitive compared to the car. So it's infrastructure and services that makes the difference. But the current circumstances have so far limited our ability to kind of invest in that opportunity. And it is an area where we think that GCP might need to be more flexible in its approach. So we are proposing that the two areas that I just outlined around active travel and operator investment in zero emission buses, that £50 million from the £70 million is allocated towards those areas. So that would still leave a significant pot for service enhancements, but it does recognise that flexibility would help in terms of achieving the overall city deal vision. But we do suggest that this split would be kept under review, and of course any proposals would need to have business cases and would need to explore those issues coming forward. So the other area is skills. The board and joint assembly actually discussed back in September and October, and an allocation was made then in response to the pandemic. The housing work stream has also, as I mentioned, looked at kind of the role of unlocking growth in the area, and it's suggested that particularly in this context, GCP needs to continue to fulfil that role of being able to unlock housing, and we've proposed a £20 million recoverable investment fund to do that as part of the future investment strategy. And then the final area is the SMART work stream. So SMART currently works across the programme to support the delivery of the city deal objectives and make sure that we're using kind of technological and digital innovation. And it's suggested that we continue this for the next 5 years with an allocation of £2.5 million. So altogether, those additional allocations alongside the other papers in this meeting, some of the other proposals from there, they take the overall programme to just over £740 million, of which 20 million is recoverable. And that's against an identified income of just over £600 million. So that there is some over programming here, but it's felt at the current time that that is appropriate, given the current uncertainty. But it does mean that future prioritisation will be needed, or the GCP will need to secure additional funds in order to fund the full 740 programme. And that does include things like continuing to explore opportunities for income generation, as well as recoverable investment. And as I mentioned before, all of the allocations in the future investment strategy are made in principle, and they're subject to the usual processes in line with the city deal assurance framework, including business case development. And when business cases come forward, the link with the future investment strategy and with the kind of overall programme budget will be made so that that prioritisation can be looked at. So I just wanted to kind of end by saying, you know, this is the second time you've seen the future investment strategy. It's not a fixed document. It will continue to evolve. But, you know, we hope that this updated future investment strategy does reflect on the current circumstances and propose a more balanced programme that kind of meets the needs of where we are today, as well as retaining flexibility to be able to respond in future. And we look forward to your feedback on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabel. I'd just like to explain how I'm proposing we tackle this together. There is, if I could ask you to turn to page 64 of the paperwork, the bottom of page 64, paragraph 1.3. That is really what we're being asked to look at through our discussion. And what I'm going to propose to try and make this as efficient as possible, because there's a lot in here, the noting of the evidence base, which is really addressed on pages 65 to 71, and then the appendices, the graphics in the appendices, which I think are, by the way, really excellent and useful information. I am going to suggest that we don't kind of specifically discuss those. People may like to draw upon those when they talk about the rest of the report, and if they have questions about anything to do with that evidence base, I suggest let's clear those up at the end of this item. But little b here is worthy of our focused conversation. Additional areas for potential further investment and the consequences of that. This is dealt with between pages 72 and 74, and so I'm going to ask for people to contribute specifically around that set of changes. Little c is also worthy of a separate discussion between us, which is about the changes to the criteria for prioritizing investment. That's another change. And then I suggest that at the end we also cover separately the implications of over-programming and the financial questions and the way that would reverberate back potentially into our programme. So I am going to go first then to the additional areas for potential further investment, which are dealt with on pages 72 and 73 and 74. And I'm going, this is the, as Isabel described it, the proposals in relation to cycling and zero emissions buses, and the way that would be funded by removing some money that was allocated to improving public transport services. So are there contributions on that area of this report, please? And clearly there are, because Mike Sargent has put his hand up, and then Christopher Walkinshaw. So Mike, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I actually want to backtrack slightly first on page 64, because my recollection of the city deal was there were 500 million from government, and there would be another 500 million that we would get from other sources. If I'm right, then I think from what I can tell, we're short on that. And have we got any plans to bolster our income from other sources, which obviously would help in terms of moving forward? But anyway, to move through to pages 72 to 74, Chair, very much support filling in the gaps in the cycling network. I think some of those are introduced by ourselves, if you like, and I think any future schemes need to make sure that we don't leave gaps. So I'll use a couple of examples. One is Arbury Road, where, to quote the officer, we just went as far as it was easy to do, which is why the cycle lanes on Arbury Road peter out when it gets to the narrow parts. So that does mean that Arbury Road is not great, and it's part of the reason for the clamour for there to be a modal shift there. And the other one was a future project, which I know Peter's very aware of my concerns because we've walked around the area. That's Mitcham's Corner. So we put a lot of money, 20 odd million, into improving Milton Road. And to follow on the observation, I think, from Isabel, that we don't want people to be put off. we will be putting in great cycleways along Milton Road, and then when people get to Mitcham's Corner, they'll be put off again. I also note that one of the proposals, I think it's from the Greater Cambridge Partnership for short-term measures in respect to COVID, is to just have buses and cycles on Victoria Avenue, which would be great if we could get across Mitcham's Corner. So I do think any schemes we bring forward in future do need to make sure we don't get to situations where people come to a juddering halt because they don't know where to go, if you like, or it's dangerous where they think they may have to go, which brings me to a wider issue in terms of cycling, because I don't think I've ever seen a report as to why people don't cycle. I think we make a lot of assumptions on why people don't cycle. And I note the work of Cambridge Assessment, where through planning, they haven't got as much car parking space as they used to have. And they've put a lot of effort into training and mentoring people and actually taking them out on a bike into town, etc. And I wonder if we are doing anything there to actually support the limited work that the County Council do on encouraging people to cycle and getting used to cycle. Because I think a lot of what we do is through hard infrastructure, and I think we miss a trick sometimes when we don't deliver the softer side. And the final point I want to make is around electric buses. We've obviously got 2 electric buses now. I don't know from the report how many more we're proposing, or it may not be electric, maybe hydrogen or something else. But I would like to know, if we only have a limited number of electric buses brought in, then what is the balance between doing that and working with Stagecoach and the other operators to get over fully to Euro 6? Because I know early in the, I think it was around about 2012, we had an agreement with Stagecoach and the other operators not to have any buses above below Euro 4 in the city. So are we just going for prestigious projects of a couple more electric buses when we'd actually have a bigger impact in terms of pollution if we got all the buses, for instance, to be Euro 6? I'd also like to note, of course, that we haven't got the charging infrastructure for at Cowley Road for electric buses, for instance. They just managed to borrow some electricity, I think, from Cambridge North Station and can only charge 2 buses at a time. So there's a danger we're going to be going off down a route which is actually quite long term and relatively costly and may not address our concerns over air pollution. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Mike. I'm going to have to ask people if they could try and be a little economic with their contributions, because you can see the size of agenda ahead of us, and we do need to try and finish that with everyone still here. So the next speaker is Christopher Walkinshaw.
Thank you, Chair. I was torn whether this came up under this item or the next item, and it is something I've raised before, but I think it comes under this area because it's to do with future investment. And I'm in particular picking up on the transport section 3.5 to 3.8 in this report, page 72, 73. We've talked a lot, and it's come up today and in the papers for today, about the number of houses being built in the area, the growth in Cambridge, our role as under the City Deal Agreement to help try and ensure that we can support sustainable growth for the area. And one of the particular targets was around transport and reducing transport levels and congestion back to, I think it's 2011 levels. As Councillor Wilson referred to earlier when we were talking about access to the hospital site, but it goes to the whole city. A lot of people access our city from outside, and increasingly are going to have to do so because of where the houses are being built and so on. And yet we're not in our plans here doing anything about improving the interchange opportunities for people to access the excellent network that we're putting in, which is really important and has to be there. But we're not making it easy for those people who come from outside to swap onto either cycling, walking, buses, or riding their horses into the city centre or around it. And I'm just concerned that we've still not got on our forward plan, either here or under city access, anything which increases the capacity of the interchanges, because we know that we've got 40-odd thousand more jobs coming into Cambridge, or 30-odd thousand on the biomedical campus in the next 10 years. Those will all come in from outside. We need every single one of them to come in, not just a few hundred people here and there. So I think it's all about interchanges, and I hope we can find a way to get that onto our plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher. I'm intrigued by the prospect of having stables at park and rides, but it's kind of interesting prospect. I've got Eileen Wilson next.
I think mine's going to be a very short point. I think one thing that would be really helpful in a lot of these documents is to make sure that the needs of people with disabilities are taken into account, because people with disabilities are very underemployed in our society, and for them to have access to work and services, I think we need to make sure that everything we're doing actually takes some account of people with various disabilities. Councillor Sargent referred to people who don't cycle. I think some people who don't cycle might be people who have disabilities that prevent them from doing so. So I think we need to make sure that we're not assuming that everyone can get on a bicycle or can get on a bus easily, and to make sure that we take account of those needs.
Thank you, Eileen. I'd like to add a contribution of my own on this section, and that is, in a way, it's really difficult, and no one's going to, I think, speak against making further investments in cycling schemes or in getting towards zero-emission buses. And I'm with everyone else on that these things that are absolutely conforming to what we're here for. But I do have a big concern about the way we are proposing to fund that by reducing the provision that we previously made towards improving the public transport services. Now, improving the public transport services had 75 million pounds by it, and the proposal here is to reduce that by 2/3, which is really significant. This was something that was to deliver benefit through pump priming services, which would have provided frequency and access in and outside the city, quite across the whole of our geography. It remains part of our strategy we'll talk about later under the next item. But if we have taken away the money to deliver it, I have a concern about whether we are being told that that is no longer going to be a realistic option. So what I would like us to ask the board, without opposing what is proposed for buses, for electric buses and cycling schemes, I would like us to ask the board to identify how this drop in 50 million in provisions for improved public transport can be made good if and when we get to a solution which requires that for longer term improvements. We are seizing clearly some short-term gains that can be achieved during COVID with the cycling schemes and with zero emissions. They have longer term benefits too, but we shouldn't be writing off our ability to make equally fundamental change on a long range basis with public transport. I mean, we must remember that actually cycling is down at the moment as well as buses, and so there are no real special cases here, and we do need to make sure that we have the ability for public transport to avoid the return of traffic throughout the city in a way that many people hope they won't see again. So if I could add that to the list of questions and ask Isabel to come back on that, please. All of the stuff so far.
Great, thank you. I think I'll just run through stuff, and then I think Rachel's just going to pick up one of the points as well. So Councillor Sargent, you asked first of all about much funding, which is the point that Rachel will just pick up in a minute. In terms of your comments about cycling and not leaving gaps in the network, I think absolutely the intention of this funding is to help to address some of that. I think and make sure people do have that kind of continuity of journey. You asked also about any work we've done on kind of why people don't cycle, and some of the softer measures that might help there. So we do work closely with the county council teams that look at some of that stuff. We have asked in the past through some of our engagement, including our big conversation and Choices Better Journeys, about why people choose particular modes and what would make them choose different modes. And I think coming through from that, infrastructure is a key part of it, and safety, but there are also other aspects, and we'll continue to look at those, and we have kind of funded things in the past, such as the Love to Ride initiative, that support more people to cycle. In terms of kind of the trade-off between electric buses and Euro 6, I think that what we will need to do if the board was to approve this allocation towards creating a zero emission bus fleet is to work up a really detailed plan about how you move through different kind of technologies over time towards zero emission. I think there are some pros and cons to Euro 6 buses. They are certainly cleaner, but they do still pollute, they do still produce carbon emissions. There are pros and cons to electric buses as well, in terms of their operational abilities, their cost, the availability of them, and what we need to do is we need to kind of look at how the different technologies will work in the Cambridge environment, building on the work that we've already done as part of the electric bus pilot, and show how a plan would build up over time to move towards zero emission. But it might, it may well be that it involves, using some technologies for a period because they will provide a carbon and air quality saving, and then moving towards zero emission. It will be difficult to jump straight there in the very near future. Then just in terms of Christopher Walkinshaw's questions around interchange. So I think certainly interchange is a key part of the GCP's programme. I think that there is something like 11,000 additional spaces at travel hubs proposed as part of the schemes in the programme to date, but certainly we need to make sure that those are truly travel hubs and do provide points of interchange so that people can access and move on from them using a variety of different modes of transport. And we are doing some work at the moment on how those should be designed in order to achieve that, and to look at kind of what the capacity is across the Greater Cambridge area, and how that will need to work in the future. Particularly, I think it's one area that we will need to reflect on in the light of COVID, in terms of how people travel and how do they access the city. Councillor Wilson, you asked about the needs of people with disabilities, and absolutely that is taken into account both on a project basis and across the programme. And when we come on to City Access, we'll actually talk about some specific work in relation to taking that programme forward and looking at the particular impacts of on people with disabilities, and how can improve choices and options for them that help them to access the city in different places as well. And then Chair, you asked about the 75 million and reducing that. So I think you're right in that there is a kind of a balance and a trade-off to look at here. I think I would say that it would still leave at least £25 million for bus services, and that would enable a ramping up over time. Still, it would enable significant investment in public transport services still. I think that we always said with investment in public transport services that it's only worth us doing it if we've identified a kind of longer term lever to pay for it. So I think that conversation in terms of how we use that funding and the balance with cycling and with electric buses, that's an ongoing conversation that we would need to have with you as you kind of look at the projects as they evolve and kind of look at business cases at different stages as well. And then Rachel, did you want to just pick up the match funding point?
Thanks, Isabel. Yes, Chair, if I may, just to point members to section 4 of the report, which you can see at section 4.4 references what we've achieved to date in terms of match funding. So 103 million has been brought into the programme to date. Clearly, as we move forward, that's mainly made up, I should say, from section 106 and councils giving a contribution from their new homes bonus. Over the future years of the programme, we'll need to identify the levels of 106 in addition to that amount that will come in, but also we're looking for further opportunities which are mentioned at 4.6 in the report, such as borrowing recoverable income or income generation opportunities. So we certainly have an aspiration to get up to levels of match funding, but I think it was an aspirational 500 million when the deal was signed. We've made good progress. We need to continue to give it attention.
Thank you both. I've got 2 other contributors, but I am aiming for a break at 4, so we are at 4, please. Ian Solemn.
Just 2 very quick points. One is just to, although Isabel has answered your point, but just to very much echo your point, Chair, that if you cut back that priming of the pump, there is surely a risk that you can't then get things started to that sustainable level, and it's something that we really do need, or the board really should consider carefully exactly how that's achieved, or I would urge the board to consider that carefully. Just on the economy and environment, there's mentions around the issues around the restriction, the capacity issues around utilities, energy, water. We identified a role for us in the energy issues. My understanding, having been involved in the economy environment group, has been that there isn't an equivalent role for us in water issues, but as it says there, those things are kept under review. I just particularly water issues are becoming so sort of visible in the area, and are regularly highlighted as a potential constraint. Although there hasn't been a role for us now, how are we making sure that that agenda just gets pushed forward, even if it's someone else is taking the lead on that, that it moves forward fast enough to actually address what's becoming an incredibly urgent issue?
Thanks, Ian. Mike?
Yeah, I definitely want to support what you said, Chair, on losing the money for improving the bus services. I don't think it's enough information in this report to really fully analyse the impact of diverting the 50 million. But I note in the City Access report at 3C as one of the options, that does say that we can have a big impact on both carbon and, I think, in terms of the environment, if we put more into buses. And the proposals for electric buses does feel to me as though it's around replacing diesel buses with electric buses, but not actually increasing the level of buses. So I think going forward, we have to know what the balance is, because in 3C it claims that that is the best way of reducing the number of people using their own cars, which possibly will have a bigger impact on carbon and air pollution than just going over to electric buses to replace the existing fleet. So I'm not happy with this report as it's put across. And I think we should go back to the board and say, well, we want a full analysis of the options, including 3C, if you like, and in effect the current position, rather than suddenly just putting a sharp hand on the tiller to go off in a different direction.
Okay, I agree with you. Thank you very much. That's the last contribution on that part of the debate, which we will reflect to the board. I'm optimistic that the remainder of this report can be covered really quickly, actually. So moving on, we were going to talk about the changes to the prioritization criteria, and they are broadly reflected, well, they are reflected on page 75 of your agenda, and they are indicated by the little ticks, the three little ticks on the right-hand column, which seem in fact to reflect what we are saying the rest of the time. So I don't see anyone indicating or burning to speak on that, and so I am going to turn the page. That is on to the question of the over programming, which in some senses we have already covered, and particular bears on the point that Mike was just describing, as I was, about the way we're moving money around. Are there any contributions, or has that already been addressed in everyone's opinion? Okay, I think in everyone's opinion it has been addressed, so that's excellent news, and that completes that report. And so I'm going to call a break 5 minutes only, because there is a lot to do still before we go on to item 9. So if officers could take us off public broadcast, and we will resume in 5 minutes' time. Thank you.
Chairman?
Yeah?
If I was to leave, would you still be quorate?
I believe so.
Yes, yes, Chairman.
In that case, can I give my apologies? I'm really starting to struggle now.
Yeah, well, thank you for joining anyway, Heather, and yeah, look after yourself.
Thank you.
Cheerio.
Bye.
Bye, Heather.
Rachel and Tim, hello. It's Lucy. Just to let you know that I will have to leave at 5. I'm very sorry. If we're really near the end, I'll stay, but I hope we won't be too much beyond that. I know Tim hopes we won't be either.
Well, you know that I'm hoping to go to the same place. So.
Indeed. That's very good.
I was hoping to be able to leave soonish as well. Not feeling very well myself. But
hang on in there, Eileen. I'll make it as quick as possible.
Thank you.
I'm very grateful you're here. Poor Eileen.
Is everyone assembled yet? Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
I think you're going again, Chair.
Okay, are we on the live broadcast now?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, so we'll resume with item 9, public transport improvements and city access strategy. I think you're familiar with the sequencing by this stage, so I'm going to move straight to the one public question we have on this item. Looks like that's coming from Roxanne, by the way her face appears. Roxanne, you want to go ahead?
Yes, thank you. Roxanne from CamCycle once again. CamCycle welcomes more detail on the city access strategy and supports the short-term measures being implemented to encourage more people to walk and cycle. More secure cycle parking at workplaces and in the city centre is very important to address issues of cycle theft, particularly when seeking to increase uptake in the use of e-bikes. We also strongly support the city centre freight pilot with increased use of cycle logistics. Our questions on short-term measures. What is the start date for the e-cargo bike loan scheme? When are tranche 2 road space reallocation schemes likely to be implemented? And has any support for those with disabilities who would like to cycle been investigated? Currently, there are significant financial barriers to those seeking access to adapted cycles such as hand cycles or tricycles. CamCycle also supports a more wide-scale program of road space reallocation to create safe and attractive active travel routes, and agree that if this is coordinated with a review of car parking and the city road network hierarchy and communicated well as a whole scheme, it is more likely to achieve high levels of modal shift and public support. However, we believe that the recommendations underestimate the impact that could be had by fast, ambitious action. For example, Leicester's pop-up cycle network, 11 miles in just 10 weeks, has already increased cycling by 45%, and school street schemes in London have a huge impact on modal shift. Our questions on long-term schemes are: Why were the cities which have achieved significant modal shift to cycling in a short time not included in the lessons from elsewhere report, e.g. Seville, Paris and Ghent? What timescales are envisaged for packages 3A, B and C? Are these dependent on the existence of the GCP's new busway and greenway schemes? Thank you.
Thanks, Roxanne. Isabel, would you like to answer?
Yes, so thank you very much for your question. So just taking the short-term measures first, I can confirm that the e-cargo bike loan scheme has got a provisional start date of January 2021, subject to the bikes arriving in time. In terms of the Emergency Active Travel Fund Tranche 2 measures, so the government confirmed the Emergency Active Travel Fund allocations on the 13th of November, and the GCP is working very closely with the County Council on implementation of those Tranche 2 measures. We're expecting to implement them in the new year, but we will be able to give a firmer timetable shortly. In terms of supporting people with disabilities to cycle, you'll see in the report that it proposes further work to maintain access to the city for people with disabilities, and this will include looking at ways of improving access to sustainable options such as cycling, but also public transport. In taking forward both the short and the longer term work, we do continue to look at lessons from other places, including those you mentioned. So, for example, Paris was included in one of the European studies drawn on in the Lessons from Elsewhere paper, and Rachel Aldred also included Seville in her as a key example in her Citizens Assembly presentation last year. We're keeping well in touch with all of the other places around the country doing pop-up cycling lanes and other emergency active travel measures. So we're hoping that, obviously the interventions in Cambridge are also going to have some really good outcomes too. So keeping on top of those. In terms of the longer term, the paper sets out some of the challenges that we're currently facing arising from the pandemic and its impact on public transport and on travel patterns. So what it is clear is that there are some areas where we can make progress, and the paper highlights road space and addressing air quality issues as ones in particular where we feel like action can be taken sooner rather than later. What the paper does say is that we would need to implement these the packages in a phased way, particularly recognising some of the messages that have come through from the Citizens Assembly and others about implementing public transport and sustainable transport measures first. So kind of starting with these measures and then adding more at future points is the kind of way forward that's proposed on this.
Thanks, Isabel. Thank you for that, and thanks, Roxanne, for raising it. So, Isabel, would you like to carry on and present the report, please?
Yes, thank you. So I'll try to be brief, but there's quite a lot in this report, so I will introduce it as best I can. So the paper sets out progress implementing the short-term measures from the City Access Programme, particularly in the COVID-19 context, but it also looks at the work that we've undertaken to look at packages of longer-term measures, which was agreed by the Exec Board in February following the motion that the Joint Assembly agreed in January. So throughout the discussions on this project, the Joint Assembly has always been clear with us that we need to follow the evidence, and that is the approach that we've tried to take in this paper. So as we've discussed on the previous item, there are some particular challenges currently arising from COVID-19 that create a level of uncertainty in terms of future trends. So in particular, the extent and nature of the economic impact of both the pandemic, but also kind of the, we're not sure yet about the future Brexit arrangements and the impact of those on the Greater Cambridge economy, the extent to which changes to working patterns will continue in the longer term, and also the future of public transport operations in terms of kind of the regulation around them, their funding environment, the levels of patronage. So what the report is trying to do is to balance, that situation with the need to make progress in tackling congestion, air quality and pollution, and kind of, trying to take the realities of that situation, but propose some actions that we can take now, and to kind of set out a clear way forward for taking further decisions in future. So it does that by proposing that we crack on with the short-term measures, and we continue to implement those in such a way that supports COVID-19 recovery and supports that to be a sustainable recovery. That where we can progress further work, now we do that. So particularly thinking about kind of road space reallocation, which is going to be important in any future package to make sure that we're making the best use of the city's road network, but also air quality. And we discussed that under the last item, but it is important for any expansion of the bus network, as well as the bus network as it stands today, that we address those pollution issues as well. It then sets out taking the work that's been done on the packages. It then looks at how we can build on those in future by setting a kind of further milestone next year to add further measures to the packages. So just kind of given the importance of the evidence to the approach in this proposed in this paper, I just wanted to go through a couple of key points again. So we have seen a particularly severe impact on public transport from the pandemic. Patronage is very low. It has not recovered in the same way as other modes, and it's likely that government support is going to be needed for some time. And they are looking at kind of how that works in the future. At the same time, it's highly likely that a high quality public transport network is going to be crucial to the future success of Greater Cambridge, to tackle congestion and air quality objectives, and to meet zero carbon commitments as well. So given the restrictions and the uncertainty over the winter, I think what this paper is trying to do is recognise the point in time that we're in now and strike a balance while setting a direction for the future as well. We have seen that air quality remains a concern, but we've also seen that lower traffic levels have meant that bus speeds and bus reliability improved a lot. So we've got some learning from there that we can take forward into the future. As we mentioned as well, we have seen lower levels of cycling and walking, but that is we think that is very much linked to lower levels of commuting at the moment. And we know nationally that a lot of people are trying out cycling and buying bikes and taking that up for the first time. So in June, the Exec Board agreed how the short-term measures that they'd previously agreed in February would be implemented to support sustainable travel and taken forward in a COVID-19 context. And the report provides an update on these. So in particular, the GCP has delivered 6 experimental road space reallocation schemes as part of the wider county programme. These are currently out to consultation before decisions next year on whether they should be made permanent, altered or removed. GCP is also working with the county on the second tranche of schemes, and will keep the Joint Assembly updated on the progress with these as well. In terms of public transport improvements, as you can imagine from kind of the context that I've just talked through, this is the area that's been most challenging to progress, and we haven't been able to make the investments that we had anticipated in kind of services or in fare pilots. Where we have made some progress is on the in the kind of area of zero emission buses, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. We have made progress with walking and cycling actions, including kind of rollout of e-cargo bikes and working with the Combined Authority, who are soon to be rolling out e-bikes around the area. And there are options being developed to provide more secure cycle parking in the city centre and at workplaces as well. The GCP is developing a freight pilot to explore delivery consolidation in the city centre, and we're currently discussing that with businesses, the university and colleges, so we can bring a proposal forward and get that started next year. The pandemic has also impacted on parking patterns, policy and charges. So the integrated parking strategy is an area as well that we haven't progressed exactly how we had first anticipated, but we do plan to undertake that work with the city and the county council early in the new year as well. So it would be reported to you next year. So alongside this work on the short-term measures, we have undertaken work looking at kind of what the future packages of measures could be like, and we've also done an integrated impact assessment so that you have some information about how they might work in practice. So on page 147 of your pack, there is a diagram which just shows the 5 packages that we've looked at and how they relate to one another. So package 1 is the short-term measures that I've just described, which are designed to pilot some approaches and create momentum for the future. Package 2 builds on the short-term measures, but also includes a clean air zone targeted at buses and freight, and that is designed to meet air quality objectives. There are then 3 variations on package 3. So they all build on 1 on 2, but they kind of take things in different directions. So package 3A, which we've called Space for People, essentially looks at if you use tools around road space reallocation and around parking to create more space for public transport and for active travel, then, you know, where would you end up? Package 3B looks, which we've called Clean Air and Zero Carbon, focuses on objectives around the environment, and is focused around the electrification of transport, but also then bringing in a ultra low emission zone type charge later on to look in those changes as well. Package C, which we've called Better Buses for Everyone, is focused around the delivery of a much better public transport network. So drawing on the work that Sistra did for us and that we published earlier in the year, delivery of a bus network of that sort alongside a flexible charge that would then come in to fund those bus services longer term and to create the road space needed for them to operate. So the measures are described in more detail in the report. I think it's probably important for me to emphasise that they are illustrative. All of them would need to have a lot of further work done on them going forward to determine their kind of exact design and nature, but they are intended to give you a sense of kind of how different objectives might play into measures and how those measures might then create the sorts of impacts that we've been exploring in the City Access project on congestion, public transport and air quality, but also more widely through the work that we've done on through the preliminary integrated impact assessment on equalities, the economy, the environment and other wider issues. Just quickly on the integrated impact assessment, what it found was that package 1 has a relatively low impact on congestion and air quality, but it does provide a baseline to create momentum and inform future decisions. Package 2, the assessment is that the clean air zone will encourage the cleaning up of commercial vehicles, but it doesn't address congestion issues, and there is limited benefits therefore for buses, for cycling and walking. Package 3A, which is Space for People, again, the assessment finds it is likely to reduce car trips and increase active travel in the areas of reallocated road space, but it's unlikely to achieve a substantial mode shift. There is a risk of displacement of journeys. There's also less ability with this package to provide a public transport alternative because there's no revenue raising measure involved. And there's care needed in this package to make sure that there are kind of alternatives for people who would find it challenging to switch mode away from the car. Package 3B, the assessment again here is that there would be significant air quality benefits, and there would be some congestion and mode shift benefits as well, resulting from the ultra low emission zone, but the impact would decline over time as vehicles, cleaner vehicles became more available, and obviously with the government moving the deadline forward to 2030 for the sale of clean vehicles, that's likely to come sooner than it might have done previously. Again, there's a need to design this package so that it avoids disproportionate impacts on low income groups and SMEs who would find it harder to change away from petrol and diesel vehicles. Package 3C, public transport, does have a particularly significant positive impact on access to employment and other destinations, as well as on congestion, air quality and carbon emissions. And there are particular benefits for those who are reliant on public transport or who live in areas where the service is currently poor. The assessment does make the point that the air quality improvements from that package are contingent on having a clean bus fleet, because if you were to have double the number of vehicles in the city, you would well exceed air quality limits if they were the same profile as what we have in the city today. So overall, each of the 3 packages of those 3 kind of more significant packages is likely to have positive benefits, and they could be maximised if you combine them in some way. And the purpose of this work is to kind of inform a discussion about how those different packages might combine to produce a final package that we can go forward with. I think that where we then have the challenge is how we do that in the context of the current situation, as described earlier. And so what the paper proposes is a phased approach. So we continue with the short-term measures, but alongside that, kind of from kind of analysis of the packages and the assessment made of them, clearly both air quality and the way we use road space are going to be important things to get right in any future package. So essentially proposing that in terms of road space, we work with the county council to make sure that that's being used in the kind of the best way that to support sustainable travel, whilst ensuring that kind of appropriate access is still maintained. And alongside this, we do some work on kind of how we maintain access for disabled people in the context of kind of road space reallocation. Alongside that, we also are proposing to undertake some further work on air quality. So in the short term, that relates to expanding the electric bus pilot to trial different technologies on different routes to inform how we might roll that out further in the future, as well as developing plans kind of linking with the future investment strategy of how we could move the bus fleet as a whole to zero emission vehicles over a period of time. And then alongside that, again, working with County Council and other partners on what mechanisms we could use to drive forward the cleaning up of the bus fleet and ensure that only clean vehicles operate in defined areas. So in parallel with that, we're proposing to take a phased approach to further package development. So advancing those two areas, but also having a review point next year where we could add further measures to a future package when we know a little bit more about the public transport operating environment and how people's travel patterns may or may not have changed as a result of the pandemic. I think that was kind of the main things that I wanted to cover, and it would be really helpful for the Joint Assembly to discuss kind of what's in the paper and the current situation and the proposed approach going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabel. I'm going to propose that we first of all direct our comments to the delivery of short-term measures, which are addressed on pages 144 to the top of 146, and then go on and discuss the rest of the document, which deals with the longer term. So, are there any contributions on pages 144 to 146? This is the list of things that are somewhat in motion and would be able to happen in the near term. Road space reallocation schemes, public transport improvements, the cycle parking, the escargot bikes, and the freight project, and integrated parking strategy. Are there any comments on those? Mike?
It's about the last mile and the freight elements, really. I mean, it's interesting, the list of businesses that it's been discussed with, because I would be surprised in my street if it would have much impact. And I think it's certainly, you know, Amazon and John Lewis and, you know, deliveries through DHL, Hermes, etc. That's the issue in the residential streets. I know DHL, I think, if I'm right, are actually working with Outspoken, is it? Or I'm not quite sure who they're working with in terms of last mile cargo bike delivery. But to me, that they're the big hitters in terms of the consolidation and of deliveries, really. You know, I suppose in my road we might get 15 delivery vans a day, perhaps. So you know,
Thanks,
I
Mike.
don't think you're quite in the right place here.
Okay, thank you. Dave Bagent.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered, is it possible that if we're going to work on the short-term measures that we can get a date in the diary to try and get them achieved by? We're moving into the end of COVID, hopefully, foreseeably sometime next year. And that's when the city is going to start moving back to life again. And it would be nice to see particularly the cycling measures and the car removal measures to be in place before that actually gets underway. I don't want to drag it out, but I think this is the theme that we should be working towards.
Thanks, Dave. Nell Kavanagh.
Yes, just looking at 2.8, where it says, you know, community road closure schemes seen them as potential short-term measures. From the media and so on, where there have been closures of streets and so on to vehicles, restrictions of vehicles movements, there seems to be a growing appetite around the country for this type of measure. And I would just urge us to think seriously of having experimental areas of implementing these in Cambridge and other market towns within the Greater Cambridge area, and also monitoring it very carefully so that we can be seeing these measures as actually permanent fixtures in our urban areas, as we try and encourage people not to be relying on the private car being right next to their front door.
Thanks, Noel. Isabel, quick response before we move on.
Yeah, thank you. So in terms of the delivery pilot, we are also engaging with the delivery companies too. I think the idea of the pilot is that it's focused on the city centre to start off with, but clearly, and kind of, you know, how the businesses there are serviced and how they then service their customers. But going forward, you know, there is a wider issue that the pilot could then be built on to look at. In terms of the question about achieving the short-term measures, you know, in the period of the pandemic, I think that is very much with the emergency active travel measures, very much the intention that those, you know, go in to support people moving around during the pandemic. I think when we said we would take forward the short-term measures back in February, we'd anticipated it would be a 2-year programme. So in terms of all of the things in the paper, the idea is that there will be kind of completed or at least substantially underway by the end of next year. In terms of the question about kind of community closures and appetite for that, so I think, you know, we continue to work closely with the County Council on the programme of road space reallocation and to think about how that might be built on in terms of the future. And I think that you know, all of the measures that GCP has implemented have been done using experimental traffic regulation orders, and so for all of those, you know, we're seeking views on them, and then a paper will come back to you before it goes to the board, and then then making a recommendation to the County Council about whether or not those should be made permanent. So that kind of question is designed into the process.
Thanks, Isabel. So I hear from the contributions that there's no one speaking in principle against any of the suggested short-term measures, and if anything, are leaning on more ambition if that can be achieved. So I'm going to now move the debate onto the longer term.
Chair, could I just ask, please? Because, I mean, I appreciate there's a rush because people need to get away and we have other things in our lives. If this particular set of topics could be moved further up the agenda at the next meeting, so that we do actually, I mean, when Isabel talks about the end of 21, I was hoping that we'd be doing things by the middle of 21, I mean, not the end. But I'll just shut up, but you could think about that.
Well, I saw Rachel nodding, so I'm not going to invite her to say yes, but I think we've got agreement that we can. Thanks, Dave. So we're going to move on to the longer term actions, which really, in terms of the pages, page 146 to the end of the report. I've got Mike Sargent, who would like to speak again.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'm now trying to put myself in the position of the members of the Citizens' Assembly, actually, and you know, the thing which rings in my mind is that we should be bold. And then when I hear Isabel talking about a phased approach, I can probably feel them wincing, if you like. So I think we've really got to crack on with the city access program. I see in the quarterly progress report, it says it's still in the design stage, really. And I think this is a major part of what Greater Cambridge Partnership should be doing. I would like to propose that the Greater Cambridge Partnership needs to actually have a medium term. We've got a short term and a long term. I think we should have a medium term offering, if you like, for when we come out of COVID. So we've seen that currently the level of people using cars and other vehicles is almost back up to the pre-COVID level, while the use of cycling and walking is only at 50% of what it was. So there's a massive imbalance there. If all the car users are ex-cycling users who are deciding to drive, then we're in a very bad state. So I think what we need to do really is to have an offering, perhaps working with the bus operators, to get people back on the buses as soon as we come out of COVID. I don't know when that will be, but I think we need to have it on the table, because these things could move forward fairly quickly with vaccines and things like that. We won't have an offering at the moment, from what I can tell. We'll just have a relatively slow, phased approach. And I think we've got to grab the initiative in the way we had to grab the initiative when the pandemic first occurred, if you like, in terms of measures. I'd also just like to make a note on 3B, I think it is. Elsewhere in the country, clean air zones have been postponed. So I think we need a report on the potential of clean air zones and where they might fit into any process. And I know they tend to be quite long term because of all the needs to implement a clean air zone. And I still come back to the point we had in section 8, which is, we should be progressing the bus offer however best we can, really, to get people to move back into buses, hopefully from all the people who are currently commuting in their cars. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Mike. Ian Sollum.
Thanks, Chair. We'll try and keep it brief. Just one sort of detail to pick up on. It does suggest on page 155 under paragraph 5.2 that the next review point is in June 2020. I think that's on page 142 in the opening as well. I assume that will be June 2021. I mean, just as sort of echoing Councillor Sargent's point slightly, is that I think in the subsequent paragraph 5.3, we recognise there that we have a role to play in shaping the way our communities emerge from the pandemic, etc., etc. And I was going to make this comment when we discussed the future investment strategy and updates to the prioritisation, and I don't think you saw my hand go up, Chair, but I thought I could make it here as well. Where it says that sort of a prioritisation on tailoring or the way that projects are tailored to emerging trends, and we've heard Isabel talk about the following the evidence, but the fact is there's not going to be much evidence around the emergence from the pandemic, and so that shaping how it comes out, using what limited evidence we have to actually shape what we want, and recognizing that there's a narrowing window of opportunity to shape that, and if we phase too much, then we're going to miss the opportunity to shape that, and we are going to end up being very reactive to trends that set in again. So I part of my question is exactly what will we be reviewing in June? Because it's not entirely clear to me what's going to come back in June, and whether that could actually be brought forward in the cycle.
Thank you, Ian. Before I go to Isabel, I just wanted to make a comment of my own on this. I mean, I can't help but be quite disappointed at where we still are with this, and I think I'm echoing what a number of other people have said. I mean, I seem to have looked at 3 types of packages set on top of each other with some pros and some cons at each of them for meetings for years now. And I think it's really a little bit disappointing, not a lot disappointing, that that we haven't got further than this. And indeed, this is a good report in the sense it lays out all sorts of evidence behind the pros and the cons, but we aren't being recommended anything, and the board isn't either. So I think the way I read the way the public is at the moment is that they are ready for bold action. I mean, they've seen huge change in their highway space over this last year, and they desperately don't want to return to how it was. And I think that it's a great pity that we haven't got a picture to paint for them already about the world that they might be returning to. And as is said in these reports, it's impossible to believe that that isn't a world which includes significantly better public transport and simply less other traffic. And if you want to address our 2 objectives of reducing congestion and improving air quality and reducing carbon emissions, there is a simple way of encompassing how you address that. It is simply less traffic. And we desperately need to get to this formula, which I think many of us sitting in the Assembly have very strong inputs based on all the evidence we've seen in repeated meetings, but we need to be allowed to get to it. And I think we're sort of fighting shy of the basic questions here. We're making a meal out of short-term measures, some of which are brilliant, but we are making a meal out of it. Actually, in the end, always fighting shy of getting to the big decisions. And I think it really is another of these issues where we need to ask the board to kind of confront this. We have all this evidence here. It needs to be put together now, and we need to start sort of putting stakes in the ground of what the future really is going to look like. So sorry to say that at the end of the string of contributions, Isabel, but over to you.
Well, thank you, Tim. So I think that Councillor Sargent made some points around being bold and being able to shape public transport coming out of the pandemic. I think it's obviously at the moment we are limited in what we can do with public transport with the government guidance around that and the position of the operators. But I would say that we have prior to COVID, we'd had some very encouraging discussions with them about the 2 short-term measures, which are around increasing services and fare pilots. Whilst we haven't been able to progress those are ready to be picked up at a point when we can. They are agreed short-term measures, so I think we are ready to make some progress. And I think that we would not want we would want to make those things happen quickly if we were able to do that at some point in the year, which of course we all hope. In terms of the kind of shaping what we want point, so first of all, sorry, the review point is intended to be June 2021, not June 2020. I think that was some sort of subconscious wishing that 2020 had never happened on my part, but certainly I think you've given us a very clear message, those of you who've spoken on this item, about the wish to kind of see more here and be doing more here. And I think that we've tried to kind of show you where you can make some progress in terms of the areas I've outlined. I think that we can take that away in terms of how in the current circumstances we could take further action on kind of public transport and things. So I don't know whether Peter or anyone would like to add anything on that, but yeah, thank you.
Would you, Peter?
I mean, I suppose not a great deal. We note, officers note your comments and a sort of general frustration. I mean, I do have to say we're in extremely exceptional times. the bus company and the rail companies are being underwritten nationally, which limits significantly changes that can be made in the short term. All of the evidence is saying that the bus services in particular and patronage are not coming back at a level that we would have expected, and significantly lower than other modes. And we've said consistently that this needs to be a evidentially led process. That said, I think as officers, we hear what you say, and we will take that away and reflect and report that sort of appropriately and consistently to the executive board.
Thank you. No, I had hoped to stop the discussion there. Dave, could it be just very brief?
Oh, it will be very brief, Chair. I just think that we should be using emergency traffic orders to get a lot of this done if we can. I think that's within the scope of this grouping, and not here, but at the board. And I think we should be asking the board to act. We may not be able to act on buses immediately, but we can act on cycling, and we can act on reducing cars, and we can act on reducing pollution. And that's all I'm going to say. Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thanks, Dave. Okay, so I'm going to be working on how we kind of can reflect the contributions there collectively. But I think we're probably done on this item now. So I'm going to move us right on to the highly related item of the Citizens Assembly 1 year on report, which does actually narrate a lot of the stuff we've talked about already. But I do think an approval or a comment on it is still invited. Are there any contributions? Oh, I should ask for Isabel to present it.
Yes, and I will be brief, Chair. Thank you very much.
I'm trying to do your job for you. Sorry.
All right. So yeah, as you said, I think the report that you've got here presents a kind of 1 year on position from the Citizens Assembly, and it does cover a lot of the content that you've just discussed as part of City Access, but also the future investment strategy. I think one thing I would highlight is that those papers were informed by the Citizens Assembly, but also that we did hold a workshop with Citizens Assembly participants in September to reflect on their priorities in the light of COVID and think about kind of short and long-term action. And I think they felt that COVID had shown how some of the things that they had in their vision could be achieved around kind of quieter streets, lower traffic levels, air quality, and wanting to keep those things if they can. I think they also did say that don't forget public transport and needing to continue our investment in infrastructure, but also think about services as well when that is appropriate. So they gave some thoughts which I think do chime with some of what we've heard today, but are hopefully useful in terms of informing the discussion. So I think yes, we're asking for kind of comments on the report, and also the suggestion that we do another report in a year's time, so that we can pick up progress made over the forthcoming year as well.
Thank you very much, Isabel. I would like to say that I think that the Assembly would want to support this this report and encourage the board to do so. Only can I hear if anyone objects to that? Okay, I thought so, because we have effectively said a lot of these things ourselves during this meeting. So thank you very much. And I'll pass across to the final item on our agenda, which is Greenways, Haslingfield, and that is on page 184 to 192. And we have a public question, I think, or more.
Yes, we have two public questions. Both have been received from Linda Worth on behalf of the British Horse Society. The first question relates to the proposed form of Greenway and reads as follows. As this Assembly has previously been informed, while supporting the creation of multi-user greenways, the British Horse Society needs to ensure that the existing amenity for horse riders is protected. To manage expectations and inform Assembly members before the £8 million outline budget is approved, please could Peter Blake confirm the following. Haslingfield to Hawkston, will the existing bridleway be kept in its original state and is the new path in addition to the bridleway? Haslingfield to Cantaloupe Farm, will improvements be suitable for equestrians? The M11 bridge, will it be suitable for horse riders through upgrade or by use of mounting blocks? Cantaloupe Farm to the M11 bridge, that this long, straight, grassy bridleway track that is open and safe for a canter will be retained and the new path is in addition to the bridleway. Upgrade of an existing footpath to link to the M11 bridge, will this be a bridleway? A link northwards to the Barton Greenway and follow the bridleway and the Balk path, will this be in addition to the bridleway? Path from the M11 bridge to the bridleway, will this be upgraded to a bridleway? M11 bridge to Burnt Close, Grantchester, will this be upgraded to a bridleway? Broadway to the Balk path, north east end, will this be upgraded to a bridleway with safe access for equestrians? Cambridge Rugby Club to Barton Road and the Balk, will this be upgraded to a bridleway with a safe crossing of Grantchester Road for all users? The second question relates to Haslingfield to Hawkston and reads as follows. Equestrian access groups were persuaded not to oppose the creation of a shared pedestrian cycle path through Harston, despite having strong evidence of historic equestrian usage, on the grounds that a safe off-road link would be provided for equestrians from Trumpington Meadows Country Park to the Harston Bridleway network. We feel strongly that the decision not to create a new bridge to allow off-road access to Trumpington Meadows Country Park is a missed opportunity for both the Melbourne and Haslingfield Greenways. This would create a much safer option for all users than having to use a path alongside the busy A10. The Hawkston Park and Ride development with increased traffic will only exacerbate the existing danger at this point. Given the serious potential safety impact, please could this decision be revisited with a view to finding a suitable solution to allow this connection to be made, which would be acceptable to the Wildlife Trust. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Wilma. That was all the public questions for this item. So which officer is responding to this?
Chair, I'll canter through this if I may.
Thank you.
So in terms of Haslingfield to Hawkston, the existing bridleway will be kept. The new path will be in addition, not in the expense of it. Haslingfield to Cantaloupe Farm, the improvements will be suitable for equestrians. The M11 bridge, it's intended that it will be suitable for horse riders by improvements to the approach ramps and increasing the heights of the parapets. That will clearly be subject to further work with Highways England, as they are the responsible agency. Cantaloupe Farm to the M11 bridge, the existing bridleway will be kept, and so the new path will be in addition. The upgrade to the existing footway to the M11 will be a bridleway. So that should surprise, that should reassure in that regard. The link northwards to the Barton Greenway will be in addition to the bridleway, not the expense of it. The path from the M11 bridge to the bridleway will be upgraded to a bridleway. The M11 bridge to Burnt Close, Grantchester will be upgraded to a bridleway. A Broadway to the Balk path will be upgraded to bridleway with safe access for equestrians. And finally, in that question, Cambridge Rugby Club to Barton Road will be upgraded to bridleway with a safe crossing of Grantchester Road. Clearly, that's the intention, Chair. They're all subject to the further detailed work that will come before you when you next see this report. In terms of the second question, the option for a bridge, we asked the question specifically into Trumpington Meadows Country Park, but it was removed following strong objections through the public consultation. The objections were largely on the grounds of environmental and ecological impact, so our proposals do not take account of that at present. We're happy to keep this under review, but clearly we've already asked the question regarding the country park. The alternative route will come closer to the A10, but will provide a safe route for all Greenway users. I hope that's helpful, Chair.
Thank you very much, Peter. And would you like to go right on and present the report?
Yep. So in terms of a sort of brief introduction, my colleague Simon Manville's here if you've got any detailed technical questions. As the Assembly will be aware, this is the final Greenways report. It follows the format of previous reports in this regard, whereby paragraph 4.1 and appendix 2 set out the detail of the proposals. The decision today is to approve to detail, or the decision that will go to the board that you're considering today will be to approve to detailed design a land acquisition stage only. This will come back before you later next year in terms of a final decision to construct. I hope that's helpful, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter. I mean, I think that anyone on the Assembly should make it clear if they have a fundamental objection to the board allowing this to go forward to the next stage. I'm not sure there is going to be anyone, but I don't want to prevent that. The rest is about making comments that should be put in the package as this does go forward. So are there any of those? Lucy Nethsinger.
I will be very brief because it's time we stopped, but I just wanted to say a huge thank you to Simon for bringing all these projects forward, actually, and particularly on this one for really listening in the consultation, because the route, particularly the route from Grantchester into Newnham, has changed quite significantly since the initial consultation, and I am very pleased with the outcome. I think they've worked really hard to get a really good solution. I think there will still need to be a lot of consideration about what happens when this route and a couple of the other ones hit Barton Road and what happens on Barton Road as it really comes into Cambridge. But I'm really pleased with the proposals from Grantchester into Newnham. So thank you for listening and for taking into account lots and lots of different people's views on this. Thank you.
That's good to hear. Ian Sollum and then Noel Kavanagh.
Thank you, Chair. I would echo Councillor Nethsinger's praise for Simon on this. I know particularly this one has taken a lot of careful thought and consideration. Just to sort of drive down on 3 points really. One is the footbridge over the or the current footbridge over the M11 bridge. It mentions having a sort of a shallower approach in order to allow cyclists to cycle straight up it. It's still quite narrow, that bridge, so I just wanted to see whether there's any modifications to the actual surface, the crossing itself, as well as the approaches. Then as it comes into Grantchester, it would seem that there would need to be quite significant landscaping. There's 2 different levels of surface. The fields are quite far below the level of the current path at the end of Burnt Close, and there's some quite significant narrowing there. I just wonder to what extent that it places a constraint on this route. Particularly when there's the option to go up onto the Barton Greenway on the other side of the M11. And then finally, the crossing, it runs behind the hedges out of Grantchester and into Newnham. The crossing there, I mean, that's right in the middle of the 40-mile-an-hour zone. I'm sure that there's lots of cars that go a lot faster than 40 miles an hour along that stretch of Grantchester Road. It's not going to be appropriate for signalled crossing, but just a hint now of what kind a safe crossing of that sort of country road would be very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Noel Kavanagh.
Yes, I'd just really like to congratulate Simon and all the rest of the team who've put together the Greenways initiative. It's a fantastic addition to improving the safety of cyclists and horse riders in our area. And I think it'll be an inspiration for the rest of the county, what GCP has achieved here. And I'm very pleased that Peter's response to Linda's requests for the equestrians. As a another of the kind of non-motorized users of our roads at the moment. I really do admire the bravery of people riding horses out on the open road. I don't know if people have noticed during this COVID period that drivers seem to be going excessively fast in the country, on the country roads, and it makes it exceedingly dangerous for us cyclists and people on horses. So it's marvelous to see that provision for horse riders is going to be increased by this initiative, as well as cyclists. That's all.
Thank you, Noel. Lot of praise for Simon there, and people seem to be supportive of where we're going with this. Who's going to respond to the points made?
Well, I think it's all the praise has gone to Simon. I'm going to let him answer the technical questions.
Yeah, go for it, Simon.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for the praise. Very nice to hear. Just very quickly, I suppose, the M11 bridge, the structure itself, I don't think we will be able to widen. We are looking at raising the parapets and having a much better approaches to the bridge. So we would hope it would be rideable by equestrians, but I suppose at a minimum we would commit to kind of mounting blocks either side, so a horse could be led across the bridge. So I think that addresses that one. Entering Burnt Close, we need further conversations with the landowners on both sides. As you know, Ian, I've already had initial conversations. It is a short stretch, which is narrower than is ideal, but I've taken a three-wheel cargo bike through there, fairly comfortable, just to test it out, and it is doable. So it might just have to be one of those locations where users give way to each other, and we look to just try and improve visibility for users who are going in opposite directions. And crossing Grantchester Road, I think the design will be some measure to calm the traffic and slow traffic on the approaches, and shorten the distance across, which is required. But it's a detail stage which will require probably some workshops with local people to discuss what are the best options on those kind of things.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Simon. And thanks everyone, because that's, I think, the end of that item. And I think that we're talking about urging this on its way with comments made noted. So in a couple of weeks' time, when the board meet, I will be going along to reflect those points together with all the other ones on the other items earlier in the agenda. I'd like to thank everyone for their contributions this afternoon. I know it's no small undertaking. 3 hours to go through these agendas, but it's really appreciated the way everyone has stuck with it, and I know a number of people have not been feeling so well at the same time. So thank you all, and we need to note finally that the next meeting of the Assembly is going to be at 2 o'clock on Wednesday, the 24th of February, and so see everyone then. And as that is a period which includes Christmas. It seems a little bit early to wish everyone a happy Christmas, but I hope everyone enjoys the holiday period anyway, if they can. Thank you. Cheerio.